These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Club's creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code TOM. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartmann. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, and today we're reading from Arundhati Roy's brilliant book, Capitalism, A Ghost Story. This is from the afterword at the very end of the book. Yesterday morning, the police cleared Zuccotti Park, but today the people are back. The police should know that this protest is not a battle for territory. We're not fighting for the right to occupy a park here or there. We're fighting for justice. Justice is not just for the people of the United States, but for everybody. What you've achieved since September 17th, when the Occupy movement began in the United States, is to introduce a new imagination, a new political language into the heart of the empire. You've reintroduced the right to dream into a system that tried to turn everybody into zombies, mesmerized into equating mindless consumerism with happiness and fulfillment. As a writer, let me tell you, this is an immense achievement. I cannot thank you enough. We are talking about justice. Today, as we speak, the Army of the United States is waging a war of occupation in Iraq and Afghanistan. U.S. drones are killing civilians in Pakistan and beyond. Tens of thousands of U.S. troops and death squads are moving into Africa. If spending trillions of dollars of your money to administer occupations in Iraq and Afghanistan is not enough, a war against Iran is being talked up. Ever since the Great Depression, the manufacture of weapons and the export of war have been key ways in which the United States has stimulated its economy. Just recently, under President Obama, the United States made a $60 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia. It hopes to sell thousands of bunker busters to the United Arab Emirates. It has sold $5 billion worth of military aircraft to my country, India, my country, which has more poor people than all the poorest countries of Africa put together. All these wars, from the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to Vietnam, Korea, Latin America, have claimed millions of lives. All of them fought to secure the, quote, American way of life, end quote. Today we know that the American way of life, the model that the rest of the world is meant to aspire toward, has resulted in 400 people owning the wealth of half the population of the United States. It has meant thousands of people being turned out of their homes and jobs while the U.S. government bailed out banks and corporations. American International Group alone was given $182 billion in the bailout. The Indian government worships U.S. economic policy. As a result of 20 years of the free market economy, today 100 of India's richest people own assets equal to 1/4 of the country's GDP, while more than 80% of Indian people live on less than 50 cents a day. 250,000 farmers driven into a spiral of death have committed suicide. We call this progress and now think of ourselves as a superpower. Like you, we are well qualified, we have nuclear bombs and obscene inequality. The good news is that people have had enough and are just not going to take it anymore. The Occupy movement has joined thousands of other resistance movements all over the world in which the poorest of people are standing up and stopping the richest corporations in their tracks. Few of us dreamed that we would see it, the people of the United States on our side, trying to do this in the heart of empire. I don't know how to communicate the enormity of what this means. The 1% say we don't have demands. They don't know, perhaps, that our anger alone would be enough to destroy them. But there are some things, a few pre-revolutionary thoughts I had for us to think about together. We want to put a lid on this system that manufactures inequality. We want to put a cap on the unfettered accumulation of wealth and property by individuals as well as corporations. As capitalists and Luddites, we demand One, an end to cross-ownership in business. For example, weapons manufacturers cannot own TV stations. Mining corporations cannot run newspapers. Business houses cannot fund universities. Drug companies cannot control public health funds. Two, natural resources and essential infrastructure, water supply, electricity, health, and education cannot be privatized. Three, everybody must have a right to shelter, education, and health care. Four, the children of the rich cannot inherit their parents' wealth. This struggle has reawakened our imagination. Somewhere along the line, capitalism reduced the idea of justice to mean just human rights. The idea the idea of dreaming of equality became blasphemous. We're not fighting to tinker with reforming a system that needs to be replaced. As a capist and a lidite, I salute your struggle. Salam and Zimbad Dad. That's the end of the book. This is from the very opening of it, chapter 1. Is it a house or a home, a temple to the new India, or a warehouse for its ghosts? Ever since Antilla arrived in Altamont Road in Mumbai, exuding mystery and a quiet menace, things have not been the same. Here we are, the friend who took me there said. Pay your respects to our new ruler. Antilla belongs to India's richest man, Mukesh Ambani. I'd read about this most expensive dwelling ever built, the 27 floors, 3 helipads, 9 lifts, hanging gardens, ballrooms, weather rooms, gymnasiums, 6 floors of parking, and 600 servants. Nothing had prepared me for the vertical lawn, a soaring 27-story high wall of grass attached to a vast metal grid. The grass was dry in patches, bits have fallen off in neat rectangles, clearly trickle down hadn't worked. But gush up certainly has. That's why in a nation of 1.2 billion, India's 100 richest people own assets equivalent to 1/4 of the GDP. And then Arundhati Roy goes on from there talking about how India is kind of an example of capitalism run amok. Capitalism Ghost Story by Arundhati Roy.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. We have a lot coming up on the program today. In our second hour, we're going to be discussing with Professor Richard Wolff the Republican Party's extraordinarily dark plot to win elections and how it interacts with economics. Professor Noam Chomsky will be with us in our third hour. Want to be getting into a whole variety of issues, including what's up with Israel. But starting off, and I've got a rather extensive rant for you in a few minutes about Liz Cheney and the Republican Party. Is it even worth saving? And we'll get into that in a few minutes. But right now, Charles Sauer is on the line with us, a libertarian economist and president of the Market Institute. MarketInstitute.org is the website. He's also the author of a book that's worthy of your consideration. It's titled Profit Motive: What Drives the Things We Do. MarketInstitute.org is the website. Charles Sauer, S-A-U-E-R, is his Twitter handle. Charles, welcome back. So my question to you as a libertarian who doesn't generally believe in the government spending money on anything other than police and courts and armies is, how does the free market supply infrastructure? Obviously, I put this in the context of, Joe Biden's proposing a couple of $1 trillion to rebuild America. How does your mythical free market do this?
Well, I think first off, we need to take Joe Biden's plan and kind of divide it out into chunks, right? I think only about 6% of the plan deals with what we would traditionally call infrastructure, as in roads and highways and maybe even the electrical grid and, water and that sort of thing. So if we're talking about that, I might actually have a surprising answer for you today. And I hosted an event, what would be about 15 years ago now, called The Right Size of Government. And in that event, we had people that proposed anywhere from 5% of GDP to 30% of GDP as being the right size of government. But there was a large agreement around that 18 to 20% rate for being the right size of government for our GDP. And one of those people that came in there was
Charles, if I could just interrupt you real quickly, I need you to get closer to your microphone. It sounds like you're talking to us from the bathroom here. Speakerphone or what? I can't see what you're doing because I'm doing the show remotely. But if you can get your mouth closer to a microphone, that'd be a great thing.
I'll switch over to my phone for you. How about that?
Thank you. Bless you.
Okay. So what we have
15 to 20%, and we're at about 20% right now, aren't we?
Yeah, we're right around that mark. I mean, if you looked, I mean, there was all sorts of academics that agreed in kind of the area that we're at right now. But one of the guys that interested me was Bill Niskanen, who at the time was one of the heads of the Cato Institute. And when it came to infrastructure, he used the Gini coefficient, which is a economic statistic that we use to look at inequalities. And he said that if we look at building roads and use the Gini coefficient, that the government is the one that should build roads and basic infrastructure. So as far as Biden's plan is concerned on building roads and basic infrastructure, I would say that Bill Niskanen is one of the top libertarians. He thinks that the government is the right way to go with that. I'm going to side with Bill Niskanen. If we look at the rest of Biden's plan, I don't believe that should actually be called infrastructure and should go into a different bill.
Oh, interesting. It is not the response that I expected. So you would support raising taxes on people who make over $400,000 a year and big corporations, or at least raising them back to where they were before Donald Trump came into office, to generate a couple of $1 trillion that could be used to I'm assuming that, being a 21st century guy, that you would include broadband in that definition of infrastructure. I mean, it's the information highway, right? It's but basically, you're in favor of doing this. Do I have that right, Charles?
I don't agree with the way that Biden is setting up the taxes, and I actually don't agree with the broadband section. I think that we have a lot of history in our country of running some of these services to people where it's not economically beneficial for us to run these services, and for us having us as a country and the people in those areas having problems. Look, LBJ did it when he ran electricity to some places and kept people in places in Texas where they couldn't make money.
But no, FDR did the Rural Electrification Administration, and then I believe it was Eisenhower, it might have been Truman, did the Rural Telephony Administration, the REA and the RTA. And the whole point of both of them was that the so-called free market was not delivering electricity to people in rural areas because it was more expensive to get it out to them. And so the government stepped in to do that. Are you saying that we should just go back to abandoning people who live in rural areas?
I'm saying that by delivering them electricity, we kept people on farms that weren't producing instead of where they would have seen an incentive to move to a city and be productive. I think we drove a lot of people into poverty through that plan, and the statistics seem to go with me on that one.
Huh.
No,
okay.
They ended up, most of them ended up losing their family farms because the farmland that they were on was untenable.
Okay,
they just lost it further down the road.
Now back to... Got it. So back to this Biden expanded definition of infrastructure. We started with broadband there. How is an educated populace not an intellectual infrastructure? We see, the United States is now slipping behind other countries in terms of original patents. It is our intellectual infrastructure, or certainly it was our intellectual infrastructure throughout the, from roughly the 1920s when, free public school became common all across the United States. It really only started in the 1890s. And so from the 1920s until the 1980s, when we had the very best public schools in the world, we also led the world in science and technology and innovation, all those other things. How could you not consider that? I mean, it's openly, clearly considered infrastructure by every other developed country in the world. This intellectual infrastructure, the right to have an education, including a college education. Why would you not consider that infrastructure?
Well, first off, President Biden and even you, I believe last week, supported giving our intellectual property away to other countries. So the left definitely isn't on board with that.
Neither of those statements are true, Charles.
Well, you supported giving our intellectual property for the vaccines away to other countries.
No,
and
that's not true.
By your own definition, giving away our infrastructure.
The WTO TRIPS waiver pays, in this case, let's say it was AstraZeneca, that is going to be manufactured on a what's the word, generic basis, say in India, for example. That company that manufactures it in India has to pay 7% of their revenue back to AstraZeneca, plus a percentage that covers some profits. So they're going to have a reduced profit, that claim, but it's not a giveaway.
You did make that. First off, I will lay the groundwork. You've never led me astray when you've laid the groundwork for an argument, and that was a part of your groundwork last week. I went along with it. When we got off the call, I tried to research it. That 7% is written down nowhere. This TRIPS waiver currently isn't written anywhere. I haven't been able to find that 7%. But even at 7%, that's
go to tradewatch.org, Charles. You'll find it.
All right, I'll look it up for you, or I'll look it up for myself.
We're pretty much out of time. Last 10 seconds, why we shouldn't pay for college?
Look, college is good. It can be privately funded.
Okay, all righty. Charles Sauer, libertarian economist, president of the Market Institute, marketinstitute.org. His book, Profit Motive, What Drives the Things We Do. You can tweet him at Charles Sauer. Charles, thanks for dropping by. It's always good talking with you.
Thank you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. Stick around. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Pipeline hack, a warning shot for electrical grid and other infrastructure. Speaking of infrastructure, I mean, when you look at this Russian criminal group, or at least this criminal group that is tolerated by Russia, it's called Dark Side. This longtime executive at ExxonMobil, his name is Stephen Arbogast. He said this should serve as a warning shot for all our vital infrastructure, which is another issue that, frankly, I probably should have gotten into with Charles to see his thoughts on this. When we have infrastructure that is privately owned, the Colonial Pipeline is privately owned, is it the job of the federal government to protect it? Should your and my tax dollars be paying for it? Or should we nationalize it and say this is our pipeline now and we'll protect it? Or should we provide protection for the pipeline and charge Colonial for it? Or whatever the company or the holding company is that ultimately owns the Colonial Pipeline. Duke Energy, I guess, is one of these big companies, and they're saying that they're aware of the potential threat and trying to build technological layers and trying to get ready for all this kind of stuff. But what do we do? Yeah, I get it. Infrastructure is interesting. I'm not sure it's the world's sexiest topic. In my next rant in just a moment, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well as any thoughts, arguments, suggestions, particularly from the conservatives out there who might want to argue with me on infrastructure. I think that the Biden plan is actually quite whole. But what I want to get into in just a few minutes is this idea that Liz Cheney is trying to save the Republican Party. And I'm going to try to build a case here in a moment that the Republican Party is not worth saving. And the reason it's not worth saving is because it has been part of the international criminal cartel, essentially, that Ronald Reagan inserted us into. That this was, very much what Reagan was all about. Was basically turning America over to the international criminal class. From the tax cheats to the big oil companies, to the weapons manufacturers, and sellers, to the whole black market folks, that there literally is an international criminal class, and that the Republican Party threw in with them in the 1980s, and Donald Trump then tried to make it official. Say, oh yeah, we're just the same as Russia, for example. When somebody in one of the press conferences, well, Russia kills journalists, and Trump's response was, well, America does some pretty bad stuff too. Well, we have done some pretty bad stuff, but are we Russia? No, I don't think so. And that's not to pick on Russia. I mean, there's no shortage of countries that I don't think have ever really tried to hold themselves to the standards that America at least holds up for herself, for ourselves. So we'll get into that in just a minute. Stick around. Coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. Lines are open here, 202-808-9925. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. There's so much news coming out of the Trump administration, so much corruption, so many crimes. Oh, now they're letting them people kill endangered species. Now they're selling off, the Arctic National Wildlife Preserve refuge rather to big oil companies. Oh, now they're they're authorizing pesticides that we know cause birth defects and damage to children. It's just step after step after step that it's so easy to forget that back in July of 2020 it was reported that Jared Kushner and Mike Pence's nephew John Pence created a couple of LLCs, American-Made Media Consultants Corporation, that took $617 million of Trump campaign cash, and nobody knows where it went. I'm telling you, these guys are professional grifters. We need to keep an eye on it. There's a whole rant about it over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program. So I as promised, I want to get into my rant for the day, which is published over at HartmannReport.com, and it's titled "Is the International Criminal Class GOP Worth Saving?" And my point is that instead of trying to clean up their act, the Republican Party seems more and more committed to getting in bed with criminals. I mean, Liz Cheney is out there saying, "Oh, we need to save the Republican Party." Really? I mean, and to any Republicans listening right now, and I know you're out there, if you want to try and set me straight on this, please, I'm ready to hear your argument. But for 40 years, from where I'm sitting, it looks to me like the Republican Party has been a peripheral part of the international criminal class. And Donald Trump pushed it fully into the international criminal class and, in fact, tried to take our entire country there with him. And, I mean, this isn't the first time this has happened. We broke from the international criminal class, which was the British East India Company in 1776. That's how we started, was getting, disconnecting ourselves from the international criminal class. Then they got in bed with the Southern, with the big plantation owners in the Confederacy in that era from 1820 to 1860. And, half this country was in bed with the international criminal class again, with the slave trade, the cotton trade, and everything else. That got busted up by the Civil War. Then these guys, these international criminals, at least the ones based in the United States, but this was after they had thrown in with Hitler with the America First movement and Charlie Lindbergh. And then they tried to hire Smedley Butler to kidnap or assassinate Franklin Roosevelt. And we fought that back. And then came Reagan. And I mean, you know, you look at what Reagan did, and it is just mind-boggling, right? I've got a list here in the article, and there's a link out to every single one of them. He traded American weaponry for hostages in order to win an election. He illegally armed murderous thugs and overthrew governments while smuggling cocaine into the United States. He opened up the banking laws to criminal behavior so widely that the entire savings and loan industry collapsed, and we had to spend $7 trillion bailing out those bankers. Your money and mine. He explicitly and overtly supported the brutal and racist apartheid and internationally recognized criminal government of South Africa. He stole money from the EPA Superfund and funneled it into Republican election campaigns. He surveilled, harassed, and intimidated journalists. He rigged HUD grants, housing grants, and then took the money from that and gave it to Republican donors. He helped Osama bin Laden start what we call Al-Qaeda these days. He eliminated 40,000 beds for mental patients in America, leading to this epidemic of homelessness. So this was, not to mention his getting into bed with tax cheats. I mean, I probably should have started with that, because that's probably the biggest part of the international criminal conspiracy is to, not pay taxes anywhere. Janet Yellen came out last week and said that the international criminal class in the United States owes this government $7 trillion in unpaid taxes. I mean, when Nixon was caught lying about Watergate and taking bribes from Jimmy Hoffa and the milk lobby and McDonald's, Americans were shocked. But keep in mind, it was Republicans. It was Barry Goldwater who walked over to the White House and said, "You got to go, Dick." That's not the Republican Party anymore. That's not the Republican Party since Reagan. Instead, what we have is Donald Trump, a real estate fraudster and serial criminal himself, who put Steve Mnuchin, the foreclosure king, the guy that Kamala Harris could have put in prison, put him in charge of all of the federal money as Secretary of the Treasury. He put the head of ExxonMobil, the company that since the 1980s has been lying to us about climate change, in charge of our State Department as our Secretary of State. He put a billionaire that Forbes magazine, for God's sake, called a grifter. Wilbur Ross, put him in charge of the Commerce Department. He had Elaine Chao as Transportation Secretary, Mitch McConnell's wife, who was, passing out money to her own family and friends, or rigging systems and deals that would tremendously benefit her own family and friends. I mean, and then Trump is like, "Oh yeah, and we're just the same as all these other countries." That's what he wanted. That's where he wanted to go. So I guess, my question, is the Republican Party worth saving? And my answer is, frankly, I don't think so. Although I'm not sure what you replace it with. I mean, there's talk about a third party, a new Republican Party. Are they going to be another billionaire-run party? Is that the deal?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I mean, if the Republican Party or if this new party, without Trump, comes along, how does it structure itself? What does it do? What does it sell?
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Homewreckers by Aaron Glantz, a Pulitzer Prize finalist. The subtitle is How a Gang of Wall Street Kingpins, Hedge Fund Magnates, Crooked Banks, and Venture Capitalists suckered millions out of their homes and demolished the American dream. It's quite a subtitle. This is from chapter 21, titled Triumph of the Homewreckers. Donald Trump took the oath of office on a chilly Friday morning, delivering an inaugural address that promised an end to the corruption and impotence that had widened America's historic wealth gap. He understood that his victory had been propelled by harnessing the public's rage and envy at having been left behind in the economic recovery, and that he promised that he would not forget it. Evoking FDR's famous Forgotten Man speech from 1932 that promised to prioritize the needs of, quote, the man at the bottom of the economic pyramid, Trump declared, quote, the forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. Politicians had prospered, he said, but jobs had evaporated, factories closed. Quote, the establishment protected itself, but not the citizens of our country. Their victories have not been your victories. Their triumphs have not been your triumphs. And while they celebrated in our nation's capital, there was little chance to celebrate for struggling families all across our land. This all changes, starting right here and right now, Trump proclaimed, because this moment is your moment. It belongs to you. This is your day. This is your celebration. End of quote. The moment, however, belonged not to the great mass of struggling Americans, but to the new president's most ardent supporters, flamboyant businessmen who profited off the pain of the housing bust and were now poised to steer the ship of state for at least the next 4 years. As Trump reached out his hand and swore to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, his close friend and inaugural committee chair, Tom Barack, stood behind him, smiling in a blue scarf and black overcoat. Afterward, Barack and Trump embraced at the U.S. Capitol's inaugural platform. The homewreckers had arrived. Barack didn't take an official position in the Trump administration, reportedly turning down an offer to be White House Chief of Staff, Treasury Secretary, or Ambassador to Mexico. Roger Stone told me he could have had any position he wanted, but working for the government would have meant making a lot less money. I don't think he has the belly for public service, Stone observed. Other homewreckers had no such qualms. If they changed the rules of the game now, they could make more money later. Steve Mnuchin, by now dubbed the foreclosure king by his critics, was confirmed as Treasury Secretary. His top deputy at One West, the bank, Joseph Otting, became the nation's chief bank regulator, the comptroller of the currency. Wilbur Ross, the bankruptcy tycoon who bought Florida's Bank United, became the Commerce Secretary, charged with everything from negotiating trade deals to overseeing the U.S. Census. Steve Schwarzman, the chairman of Blackstone, became chair of the White House's Strategic and Policy Forum, a group of business leaders who were to meet regularly with Trump. Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan Chase was named vice chair. Though the group disbanded over the summer after Trump's statement that bigotry and violence on many sides were responsible for a white nationalist's killing a counter-protester in Charlottesville, Virginia, Schwarzman, along with Barack, is said to be among a small group of outsiders, including Sean Hannity, who are put directly through to the president rather than being routed through the normal communications channels. Hannity reportedly chats with Trump nightly. Schwarzman has flown on Air Force One. On February 12, 2017, less than a month into Trump's presidency, while the commander-in-chief was dining with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan at his Mar-a-Lago golf club, Schwarzman threw a massive 70th birthday bash at his Four Winds estate, barely a mile and a half away. This time, neither Donald nor Melania Trump could make it, but daughter Ivanka and son-in-law Jared Kushner did, along with Mnuchin, Ross, and a who's who of high finance and culture, from Henry Kravis, co-founder of the hostile takeover firm Kohlberg Kravis Roberts, to the fashion designer Donatella Versace. The party featured live camels, trapeze artists, fireworks, and a gondolier. Schwarzman's tennis courts were covered with Asian-themed staging. The man who'd hired Patti LaBelle to sing Happy Birthday for his 60th was serenaded by Gwen Stefani on his 70th. After Happy Birthday, the peroxide pop star took a, quote, a quick twirl with the birthday boy around a dance floor constructed inside a two-story tent where acrobats shimmied and jumped, the New York Times reported. Unlike a decade before, when Schwarzman's glorious pre-bust bash sparked condemnation from sources as conservative as the Wall Street Journal, this time the festivities sparked very little blowback. In her story, Bloomberg reporter Amanda Gordon reveled in the comparison with Schwarzman's 60th. There were some differences, though, she wrote. Remember that beautiful fur coat on Melania Trump? It was New York in February on a weeknight. This time, no bundling required, with many folks golfing and swimming all day before a balmy night and fireworks alongside a full moon.
Howard Marks, the co-chairman of Oak Tree Capital, a vulture firm that had bought and flipped 3,000 foreclosures, told Gordon, quote, "The world is an uncertain place. A lot of people are unhappy with a lot of other people. There are a lot of things that people are upset about. So it's nice to have an evening where everybody's happy, harmonious, and upbeat." End quote. There was a lot of celebrating to be had. In June, the gang got together for the marriage of Steve Mnuchin and his third wife, actress Louise Linton, almost 2 decades younger than him. And then it continues from there. The book is Homewreckers by Aaron Glantz. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So people wonder, why militias all of a sudden? How is it that all kinds of Americans are showing up with assault weapons in the Capitol building, trying to assassinate the Vice President of the United States and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and stop the counting of the presidential votes, the Electoral College votes? Where did this come from? You know, the last time we saw an armed uprising against the federal government in the United States was 1861. It was the Confederacy. Is this a Confederacy rising again? Well, yeah, there is a huge white supremacist element to it. In fact, I'd say it's one of the primary animating impulses. But what really got these things going, these militias going, was the Heller decision written by the opinion written by Antonin Scalia and published on June 26, 2008. And it has crazy language in it, basically begging for militias. I share it with you in a special video over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Just 2 things I wanted to just as punctuation marks to my rant, and then I'll pick up your phone calls here in just a moment. The first is that Joe Biden is saying, basically, you know, I mean, his proposals, the American Jobs Plan, the American Families Plan, his infrastructure proposals, the hard infrastructure and the soft infrastructure, I think is how they're referring to it in the administration. The roads and bridges and the human infrastructure, shall we say. It's going to cost about $4 trillion. And that's going to require undoing some of the Trump tax cuts and maybe even undoing some of the Bush tax cuts. And that apparently has some Democrats a little nervous. So I just wanted to give a shout out or just, you know, toss this out that, you know, if you're making phone calls and you want to assure your Democratic senators, these are all Democrats, that raising taxes on people who make over $400,000, you know, if you're in that category, if you make over 400 grand and you're fine with paying a little more in tax so that we can have a decent country, give them a call. I mean, if you're opposed, give them a call. It's up to you. You can say anything you want. And certainly if you make under $400,000, you know, it's just pure benefit to you. But this is from a piece by Carrie Eleveld over at the Daily Kos. It's titled, "Biden's Very Popular Proposals Are Meeting Resistance as Some Democrats Fret Over Raising Taxes." And Carrie notes, overhauling taxation of multinational corporations is getting the silent treatment from Senate Finance Committee Chairman Ron Wyden of Oregon, Senate Banking Committee Chairman Sherrod Brown of Ohio. They're both very, very solid progressives. And Senator Mark Warner of Virginia. Biden's proposal to roughly double the amount of capital gains taxes paid by investors who earn more than $1 million a year is getting some resistance from Senator Warner and Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey. This is a change, by the way, that would only affect 0.3% of taxpayers. And several House Democrats have also indicated they wouldn't support Biden's proposals unless they also repeal a cap put in place by the GOP tax law. These are the so-called SALT taxes. I actually think that repealing, I realize that many of my progressive colleagues say, hey, you know, limiting the amount of state and local taxes, that's what SALT stands for, state and local taxes, S-A-L-T, limiting the amount of state and local taxes that you can deduct from your federal taxes to 10 grand, which was what Trump put into place. means that rich people are going to get a tax break if you do away with that, and allow people to deduct all of the taxes that they pay to the state from their federal taxes. But if you don't do that, you have double taxation, number one, which is just like wrong. And number two, there are a lot of states where property values are high and the principal store of wealth that middle-class people have is their home, and they're paying fairly high property taxes, plus they're paying high state income taxes. California, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Oregon even, or at least the Portland part of Oregon to that extent. So I think that blowing up the salt tax thing, going back to the way it was before Trump messed with it, actually is what I would advocate. But, if you disagree with me, let me know. Anyhow, let's pick up some of your phone calls here. Mark in Long Beach, California. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Well, yesterday you were trying to figure out a name for the new Republican Party, and I remember heard on Mitch Jesrich's show on KPFA, a guy kind of blurted out the Republican Confederacy, and that term stood out in my mind like a bright star. Yeah.
They're embracing the values of the Confederacy: hierarchy, patriarchy, slavery, or at the very least segregation in the modern form. Although I think you could say something close to slavery, slave wages, shall we say, and not to diminish the awfulness of slavery, obviously, what's the word for insurrection? Treason. Hatred of their own government. So yeah, I think you're onto something, Mark. That was a good one. Thank you. Todd in Summit, Mississippi. Hey, Todd, what's on your mind?
Yes, I've been listening to you, and I happen to agree with you about the Republican Party should not be saved. In all honesty, they have, since the 1980s, been moving to what I would call a corporate communistic model for your diehard Republicans, your moderate Republicans. But now we are seeing this move into more of a fascist type party. And once you reach that point, there is no way that it can be saved. The Chinese have been watching this, and they have actually been modeling what corporations in the United States have been doing since the 1980s. And they've basically refined it and made it work for them. Right. Corporations have basically, they watch their employees now. They put software on their computers so they see everything that they do. And the Chinese are basically doing the same thing. And the Republicans, anytime anything is done for the American worker or for the benefit of the people, they fight it and fight it and fight it. And the only reason for this is not just for the wealthy, but it's also to set up this symbiotic type plutocracy that honestly mirrors more of a communist type movement than anything else, and the rest are just fascists.
Yeah, by communist, you mean the actual communist countries like the old Soviet Union and current communist China, where basically the government is totalitarian. That's what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I get it. I think you may be right, and the extent to which American companies are moving in that direction is also pretty shocking. The book that I just sent off to my publisher's editor, to BK's editor, it's the first draft. I'll get it back in about 3 weeks, and then I'll have a month to fine tune it and then send it off again. But it's the book that I've been working on for the last 6 months. It's called The Hidden History of Big Brother in America. And there's several chapters in there about how corporations are like hyper monitoring us, how they're hyper monitoring their employees, how the loss of privacy, the loss of personal power all of these things. So to your point, and the Republicans are just like totally in with all of that. So to your point, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Thank you for that. Joanne in Van Nuys, California. Hey, Joanne, what's up?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the drugs, because if you remember during the Bush-Reagan era, remember the Iran-Contra? And that was actually one of the largest international drug cartels was being run. And they were bringing those drugs in and selling them in Southern California and then spreading them across the country. That's right. When crack cocaine came in. And these people, the same people, the Bushes and company, they have made fortunes on drugs and on the pain and suffering of the people they sell and get addicted. And they've been doing it since that's their original fortunes with the Clipper ships and the opium wars. And they're still doing it. And I'm glad you brought it up. And don't forget, when William Casey was arranging this deal, he was going over, and making arrangements with Iran to pull off that first October surprise, or second one. He was testifying in December. I can't remember the actual year, but it was like 1989. And he actually said this goes right to the top, meaning the Oval Office. And the next, he was visited by a CIA doctor, and suddenly that part of his brain that allows you to talk and articulate, he was no longer able to speak. So he never talked or continued his testimony.
Yeah, I know the story. I've never been able to track that. I know that, the Republicans knew that cocaine was coming into this country kind of in exchange for those weapons. I've never been able to track the money, but I always figured that from the point of view of Reagan and Bush, because that's when it was happening, that they were just delighted to see all that cocaine just devastating mostly black communities. But Joanne, I'm sorry, I'm out of time. We'll continue.
Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Joanne, if you have a link to the money trail on the cocaine that was brought into the United States, post it on Twitter. I'd love to see it. And welcome back. Eric in Erie, Pennsylvania. Hang on just a second, Eric. There we go. Eric in Erie, Pennsylvania. You're on the air, Eric. What's up?
Hey, Tom. I'm calling on your rant, and I'm inclined to agree with you. I don't think it's salvageable, and I'm a guy that's,
So what replaces it?
Well, they're going to have to take the germ of the, original Republican idea. If there's want for it, and surely there will be. That's a lot of voters. But my argument's from the opposite direction. Yours is kind of top down on the cartels and the corporatocracy, and I agree with you completely. But I think from the bottom up, we've now seen this coalescing of a really kind of toxic, cabal of anti-vax weirdos, white supremacy weirdos, strange bedfellows, all finding unity under this ugliness of the modern GOP. And we need to break them up as a voting bloc, because together they're probably the single most dangerous threat to American democracy. So it's a lot of numbers.
Yeah, and that's
people.
something. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, it's a lot of people that could vote in candidates and policies that in a single election cycle we could see, the power of our culture, of our nation shift in a single election. Yeah, and we have, by the way. I mean, that's what we saw in 2016. That's what we saw in 2020. I get your point. And in fact, you're making me think that maybe I should go back and edit my op-ed today. And one of the cool things about having them online is that I can just go in and tweak them as the day goes on, to include the fact that the Republican Party has not only brought in the international criminal class and the domestic criminal class, but they've also brought in the racists. They've also brought in the misogynists. They've brought in a bunch of deplorables, right? It's like, Yeah, Hillary was right, and this is a group, and it's like the question we ask about Republican voters every cycle, them voting against their own economic self-interest. They're gullible enough to hang their hat on, hey, I'm part of the supreme class, the white class, the chosen people in America, so at least I have that, even though, my home is, beyond my affordability, my children can't get education, I can't get health care, yada, yada, but I'm on the good side. It's enough for them to identify, because it really is about identity politics, the thing they accuse so much in the direction of the left. They're so guilty of themselves.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's what LBJ said. Give white guys black people to look down on, and they'll let you pick their pockets. I don't have the exact quote.
That's what we have.
But yeah. In fact, he said, "Hell, they'll turn their pockets inside out for you."
They'll offer. They'll look at Trump. They'll throw their money at you.
Yeah. And actually, Trump has made hundreds of millions of dollars off his suckers, off the suckers who are following him.
Historically, a wealthy, big city, coastal elite Trump type, they would never spit in his direction. But now, he's their representative.
Yeah, it's bizarre. Thank you, Eric. Good comments all. We'll continue with your phone calls and thoughts on this. And I often thought that if the Republican Party went away, that maybe the Democratic Party, parts of the Democratic Party would become the new Republican Party. I don't know. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Astonishing news out of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that has to do with the lifespan of Americans. Since World War II, the average lifespan of American men and women have continuously increased, all the way up to 78.8 years in 2019. Continuous increase. Things were getting better, more and more people were getting health care, we were making medical technology advances. There was a rather dramatic decline in smoking between the 1990s and the 2010s. All kinds of things were working together. And then came Donald Trump's response to COVID-19, causing America, with 4% of the world's population, to have 20% of the world's deaths. The result of that has been extraordinary. For the first time since World War II, American life expectancy has declined. It's all over in a new video for supporters of our program over at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So if the Republican Party was to go away tomorrow morning, or just, lose so much power in the 2022 elections, God willing, right, that there's a huge space for another political party to step into this spot. And is it going to be the Libertarian Party? Is it going to be Charles Sauer's group? Is it going to be some new crazed right-wing, America First Party? Is it going to be Julio Rivera's group? Not to call him crazed, but, well, he might call himself crazed, who knows. Or would it be the so-called moderates in the Democratic Party splitting off and saying, okay, we'll become, because they're basically where the Republicans were prior to Reagan, right? Slow and steady and keep taxes low and keep, business friendly, but don't be nuts. How does that work? I could build a case for any one of those things. I think it's just fascinating. Anyway, Joe in Elyria, Ohio. Hey, Joe, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Love what you're doing always. And today, the word that stuck out to me most, you keep talking about this international criminal class. And I just kind of wonder when Republicans are going to realize that, this international criminal class is the globalists that they have been told to worry about for so long, and that, they have put those people into power. And, talking about, what is the Democratic Party, what is the Republican Party going to look like in the future here? They always say that you don't want to trade liberty for security, but will Republicans, how bad does it have to get for Republicans to see that, something like health care for all is not trading liberty, but trading risk and, gaining liberty in the security of being able to pay for your health care and have a life.
Well, what they've been told to be afraid of over the years, Republicans, or we should say conservatives, because this was once in the Democratic Party as well. So what conservatives have been telling Americans to freak out about and worry about over the years has basically been communism. There's God forbid, communism. And what is communism? From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. So everybody gets health care and everybody gets, there's been that rant. And then there's also, of course, the anti-Semitic rant, right? The international Jewish conspiracy kind of thing. Those have been the two, look out, be afraids that are constantly coming out of the right wing. Now they've added to this black people, by the way, Joe. I just retweeted this just a few minutes ago. In fact, let me go to my profile here and share this with you because I think, it's apropos of this. This was from CPAC. Right, and this is Richard Grinnell, one of the CPAC guys. He says, Biden is too weak to stop the progressive left from taking over. Kamala doesn't understand what's going on. We have a shadow president in Susan Rice, and no one's paying attention. So 3 days ago, they were saying that Kamala Harris was the shadow president, a black woman. Now they're saying Susan Rice is the shadow president, a black woman. On Monday, one of the right-wing reporters asked Jen Psaki if this was the third term of the Obama administration, our first black president. All of these white conservatives are just continuously freaking out that, oh my God, it's possible a black person's in charge. So now they've even gone beyond the, it's the communists or it's the Jews. Now it's the black people of being in power, right? Before it was, look out, they're going to, mug you or make off with your daughter or something. And now it's, oh my God, they've got power. It's like all the Republicans have to do is, all they have to sell basically is hate and fear. It just, and they just keep going back to this old tune. And I get that it sells to some people. I'm sorry, Joe, go ahead.
My apologies. The one argument that I would have to say to that is that I come from Ohio, which, has always been somewhat considered a conservative state. But back in the 1800s, conservatism at that time meant that, you kept your banks in line so that they didn't go bankrupt. And that is what eventually gave Ohio the power to be able to take on Rockefeller and to control some of the...
Ohio was the first state to pass antitrust legislation. The Sherman Antitrust Act, Senator Sherman was from Ohio.
That's all I'm saying is that, there is a limit to the amount of liberty that we want to pass along to anyone on a personal basis, but once again, that whiteness that people seem to cling to that makes them feel safe, that makes them vote for Republicans, people need to realize that is based on money. And if you don't have $1 billion or more, you're not really white in the eyes of the people who are pushing our politics and pushing the poorest and most in need among us to vote against our own needs.
Yeah, I'm not sure not really white would be exactly the phrase, but certainly not worthy. But this is the freak out that the conservatives and the Republicans are pitching is, oh my God, somebody other than a white man is in charge. We should all freak out. Joe, thank you for the call. We'll continue the conversation. Actually, Richard Wolff is going to be with us on the other side of this break, and then we'll continue the conversation.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Club's creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code TOM. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartmann. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Homewreckers by Aaron Glantz, a Pulitzer Prize finalist. The subtitle is How a Gang of Wall Street Kingpins, Hedge Fund Magnates, Crooked Banks, and Venture Capitalists suckered millions out of their homes and demolished the American dream. It's quite a subtitle. This is from chapter 21, titled Triumph of the Homewreckers. Donald Trump took the oath of office on a chilly Friday morning, delivering an inaugural address that promised an end to the corruption and impotence that had widened America's historic wealth gap. He understood that his victory had been propelled by harnessing the public's rage and envy at having been left behind in the economic recovery, and that he promised that he would not forget it. Evoking FDR's famous Forgotten Man speech from 1932 that promised to prioritize the needs of, quote, the man at the bottom of the economic pyramid, Trump declared, quote, the forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. Politicians had prospered, he said, but jobs had evaporated, factories closed. Quote, the establishment protected itself, but not the citizens of our country. Their victories have not been your victories. Their triumphs have not been your triumphs. And while they celebrated in our nation's capital, there was little chance to celebrate for struggling families all across our land. This all changes, starting right here and right now, Trump proclaimed, because this moment is your moment. It belongs to you. This is your day. This is your celebration. End of quote. The moment, however, belonged not to the great mass of struggling Americans, but to the new president's most ardent supporters, flamboyant businessmen who profited off the pain of the housing bust and were now poised to steer the ship of state for at least the next 4 years. As Trump reached out his hand and swore to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, his close friend and inaugural committee chair, Tom Barack, stood behind him, smiling in a blue scarf and black overcoat. Afterward, Barack and Trump embraced at the U.S. Capitol's inaugural platform. The homewreckers had arrived. Barack didn't take an official position in the Trump administration, reportedly turning down an offer to be White House Chief of Staff, Treasury Secretary, or Ambassador to Mexico. Roger Stone told me he could have had any position he wanted, but working for the government would have meant making a lot less money. I don't think he has the belly for public service, Stone observed. Other homewreckers had no such qualms. If they changed the rules of the game now, they could make more money later. Steve Mnuchin, by now dubbed the foreclosure king by his critics, was confirmed as Treasury Secretary. His top deputy at One West, the bank, Joseph Otting, became the nation's chief bank regulator, the comptroller of the currency. Wilbur Ross, the bankruptcy tycoon who bought Florida's Bank United, became the Commerce Secretary, charged with everything from negotiating trade deals to overseeing the U.S. Census. Steve Schwarzman, the chairman of Blackstone, became chair of the White House's Strategic and Policy Forum, a group of business leaders who were to meet regularly with Trump. Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan Chase was named vice chair. Though the group disbanded over the summer after Trump's statement that bigotry and violence on many sides were responsible for a white nationalist's killing a counter-protester in Charlottesville, Virginia, Schwarzman, along with Barack, is said to be among a small group of outsiders, including Sean Hannity, who are put directly through to the president rather than being routed through the normal communications channels. Hannity reportedly chats with Trump nightly. Schwarzman has flown on Air Force One. On February 12, 2017, less than a month into Trump's presidency, while the commander-in-chief was dining with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan at his Mar-a-Lago golf club, Schwarzman threw a massive 70th birthday bash at his Four Winds estate, barely a mile and a half away. This time, neither Donald nor Melania Trump could make it, but daughter Ivanka and son-in-law Jared Kushner did, along with Mnuchin, Ross, and a who's who of high finance and culture, from Henry Kravis, co-founder of the hostile takeover firm Kohlberg Kravis Roberts, to the fashion designer Donatella Versace. The party featured live camels, trapeze artists, fireworks, and a gondolier. Schwarzman's tennis courts were covered with Asian-themed staging. The man who'd hired Patti LaBelle to sing Happy Birthday for his 60th was serenaded by Gwen Stefani on his 70th. After Happy Birthday, the peroxide pop star took a, quote, a quick twirl with the birthday boy around a dance floor constructed inside a two-story tent where acrobats shimmied and jumped, the New York Times reported. Unlike a decade before, when Schwarzman's glorious pre-bust bash sparked condemnation from sources as conservative as the Wall Street Journal, this time the festivities sparked very little blowback. In her story, Bloomberg reporter Amanda Gordon reveled in the comparison with Schwarzman's 60th. There were some differences, though. She wrote, "Remember that beautiful fur coat on Melania Trump? It was New York in February on a weeknight. This time, no bundling required, with many folks golfing and swimming all day before a balmy night and fireworks alongside a full moon." Howard Marks, the co-chairman of Oak Tree Capital, a vulture firm that had bought and flipped 3,000 foreclosures, told Gordon, quote, "The world is an uncertain place. A lot of people are unhappy with a lot of other people. There are a lot of things that people are upset about. So it's nice to have an evening where everybody's happy, harmonious, and upbeat." End quote. There was a lot of celebrating to be had. In June, the gang got together for the marriage of Steve Mnuchin and his third wife, actress Louise Linton, almost 2 decades younger than him. And then it continues from there. The book is Homewreckers by Aaron Glantz.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So yesterday in the piece that I published over at HartmannReport.com, I titled, the Republican Party's extraordinarily dark plot to win elections. I laid out this hypothesis, which I think is supported by a substantial amount of evidence, that the part of the Republican strategy to win elections in 2022 and 2024 has a 3-part piece to it. Number one, convince Americans not to get vaccinated so that the country doesn't reach herd immunity, so Joe Biden doesn't get the virus under control. Number one. Number two, if he can't get the virus under control, the economy doesn't get back to full and normal functioning, and so the economy is crippled. And then number three, the Republicans run ads saying Joe Biden couldn't put the economy back together. We are the experts at that. Hire us, put us into office and trash Joe Biden, and that this is their new election strategy. So my question is, A, does this make any sense? But this is kind of a political question. For Professor Richard Wolff, who will be with us in a moment, I'd really like to put this as an economic question, which is, how does this work, this relationship between economics and politics? Are there historical examples of politicians, political parties, or circumstances, shifting politics this sort of way? I guess, what's the economics of this? Professor Richard Wolff is with us, the economist, co-founder of democracyatwork.info. his most recent book, The Sickness is the System, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself. And you can tweet him at Prof. Wolff with 2 Fs. Professor Wolff, your thoughts on my hypothesis?
Well, I think you're touching something which I'm very glad you did. And I should say only in preface, I don't want to depress anyone, but I want to be honest in my answer. I think the Republican Party has made a decision. It's really a bigger decision than having to do with Mr. Trump, although that's what it appears like. It's a decision that assumes something they dare not say. And I think they're right about this. The assumption is that American capitalism is now an economic system in decline. You know, the first 150 years of our country were a happy ride up. Not that there weren't problems and not that there weren't conflicts, but we had the good fortune to be in a period of a dynamic, rising, ascending capitalist economy and capitalist economic power. Around the 70s and 80s of the last century, we kind of peaked, and we are now in a decline. And the Republican Party has decided that in that decline, they can win political points by blaming the other side for a decline. That is crazy and ridiculous and makes no sense. It's easy to show that the Republican Party has contributed at least as much to that decline as the Democrats. In contrast, the Democrats have a different plan. They want to deny the decline like the Republicans do, but they half admit it like the Republicans do, but in a different form. They're trying to offset it, to correct it, to come in there with government programs, with a little bit of wealth and income redistribution. I don't think it's enough. I think their failure to face the decline means they're going to be doing too little and too late, and thereby risk playing into the hands of the Republicans, who, as you rightly say, are playing the dark game of, if anything, helping the decline so that they can blame it on the other side. What's really needed is a political party or force or movement or whatever you want to call it that is honest about the decline and takes the steps necessary to, at the very least, slow it down or try to come up with rearrangements of the world economy that will not allow us to spend the rest of this century in a kind of decline that we've already seen in the last century suffered by Great Britain.
Now, I've seen analysis that suggests that the happy ride that you referred to was that there are historical parallels. I mean, ancient historical parallels. The Maori people 6,000 years ago in Australia, in New Zealand, where basically you had, the people discovered an island that was filled with these 50-pound moa birds, food on the hoof. And they had just a wonderful, wonderful life for a couple of centuries, and then they ate the last moa bird and descended into savagery, I guess, for lack of a better word, or at least let's say their culture changed dramatically, and war became at the center of their culture. And I think the Maori would agree with that analysis. That our 150-year ride was basically, that the Native Americans have been good stewards of the natural resources of this continent for the better part of 10,000 years, and we came along and basically just, robbed, raped, and pillaged. We just, stripped this continent of its natural resources, and we're starting to hit the limits of those natural resources, of our ability to exploit those natural resources. And one of the big questions is whether we can reinvent an economy based essentially on recycling, on recovering natural resources and reusing them, and converting from fossil fuels to solar. What do you think about all that?
Well, I agree with it, but let me push back just a touch, Tom. I think that the focus on climate control, on global warming, it's all valid, it's all appropriate. But it contains within it also what psychologists call a displacement. The alarmism, the worry, the anxiety, the doom that is foreseen is a displacement about the feeling, correct, I believe, that our economic system is in a kind of downturn that will replicate what the Maori did in New Zealand, what the ancient Sumerians did in that part of what we now call Iraq or ancient Mesopotamia. We do, as you say, have repeated examples. What we should learn is that we need to come to terms to work out arrangements with other people and with nature to manage a more fair distribution of the world's benefits, of wealth, of income, and all the rest of it. Because if we don't, then we have in store for us what has been in store for every other society in a comparable period of downturn following an upturn. And that's why, brandishing the war swords against China, screaming against other countries with tariffs, all of this flailing around of a declining power is very scary because it suggests you haven't learned the lessons. And to have our two major political parties competing with each other, how to either take advantage of the decline or somehow get away with far less than a declining empire needs if you're not going to go down with it, that's a sad spectacle of political inadequacy.
Yeah, and probably will not end well for anybody. Professor Richard Wolff, democracyatwork.info, Prof. Wolff on the Twitter handle. Professor Wolff, thank you again for dropping by.
Good to talk with you, Tom.
Back at you, sir. Always nice having you with us. Thank you. It's 15 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. Defending America from the conservative weapons of mass deception.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's the True People's Media. Back with your calls right after this. And welcome back. Let's see here. Steve in Topanga, California. Hey, Steve, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I was looking at this pipeline deal, and, I just didn't really think much about it. But then as soon as I heard they're opening it up without paying the ransom, I kind of smelled a rat. And let me tell you why. Who does this hurt the most? It hurts Biden's economics and the economy in the South, pretty much. And these people are going to remember it. Now, you look at the company, the pipeline, they still got the oil. They just can't deliver it. So they'll spread it out over time, and everything will get back to normal. And they'll probably be able to raise the price a little bit because they're going to have to dole it out. And, the Russians, it's just a ploy. These are criminals. We're talking about absolute criminals.
Well, there are reports right now, Steve, that a $5 million ransom was paid. That's what it took. I mean, they're unconfirmed, but there are multiple reports now that they paid $5 million to get their systems back, and that the kidnappers, the black man, the what would you call them? The people who locked them out, the ransom folks. That they were happy to take that money quickly and get the whole thing over with because they've got more scrutiny from the FBI than they ever wanted.
Yeah, I just kind of skeptical about all this kind of stuff, and so it makes you want to read through the lines a little bit. I know it sounds a little conspiracy and all that, but I don't know. I just it's something to think about because I really don't trust these. I mean, they're ready to sell drugs, bring in drugs, and do arms for hostages, and all kinds. The Republican Party has been a criminal conspiracy for pretty much my whole life, and So I just don't believe it. Anyway, thanks for taking my call.
Yeah. Okay.
Talk to you later.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Bye.
Good talking to you. Gloria in Salem, Oregon. Hey, Gloria, what's on your mind?
Hi, I went to the doctor, and they're anti-vaxxers, and I went to the dentist, and they don't have to be vaccinated. And if you ask them if they're vaccinated, your doctors and your nurses and your medical assistants, they tell you that they don't have to tell you. And I don't know who's vaccinated and who's not, and they don't have to tell you. And
oh, that's totally weird. Gloria.
And I wrote a letter to my doctor. Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish your story.
Yeah, and my doctor said, well, there's nothing that we can do if the people don't want to be vaccinated. We can't make them. And the dentist said the same thing. So you go to the doctor at your own risk because they're anti-vaxxers. They're like Seventh-day Adventists and things like that, and they don't believe in it. So if that's your RN or your nurse, you're in trouble. Yeah, it's serious.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I called my chiropractor because I wanted to get my back cracked. And he was like, no, we're not vaccinated. And I said, okay, well, you know, you have my phone number. Call me when you are, and I'll come back. But I'm not coming back until you are. And he was like, rah, 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 rah. And that was the end of that. Then I called my dentist yesterday because I had a filling fallout like 9 months ago. And I've been, you know, using stuff from the internet to fill it in since then. And so I called I got a reminder from my dentist that I've got an appointment next week. And so I called him up yesterday and I said, I just want to make sure that everybody in your office is vaccinated. And she was like, not only is everybody in our office vaccinated, but we will only work on people who are vaccinated. And I was like, cool, I'm coming to you guys. So shop around, Gloria. This should be your cue that's no more. You know, that doctor is no more for you. Gloria, I got to run, but thank you for the call and thanks for bringing up the topic. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So there's a new study that this is not peer-reviewed, but it is in preprint. It is being peer-reviewed as we speak, where the scientists were looking at the ability of the COVID virus to jump from the human species. You know, it started with bats, and then it apparently went to pangolins and then to humans. To jump from humans to other species, which would be a big problem. If we can infect other mammals, you know, our cats and dogs, if we can infect rats or mice, who have traditionally been disease vectors for all kinds of things, from the bubonic plague to hantavirus, if we can infect them with this virus, we've got a whole brand new problem. And sure enough, they have found that these two variants, B351 and P1, both can infect mice in the laboratory. And they say this abrogation of the species barrier represents, a serious problem. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. Minutes past the hour. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says a shocking $7 trillion in taxes is going uncollected. See, this is this international criminal class. These are the members of the international criminal class who are stashing their money in tax havens all around the world, who happen to live in the United States. $7 trillion worth of unpaid, uncollected taxes. That could pay for your health, for a national health care plan. It could wipe out all the student debt. All the student debt in the country is only $1.5 trillion. $7 trillion. The international criminals living in the United States have avoided paying taxes on. Worldwide, there's estimates as high as $50 to $100 trillion that is being evaded or avoided. I mean, it's remarkable. By the way, I did want to also comment on and put on the table and get your thoughts on some of the testimony we saw yesterday. I did talk about some of this yesterday, but just to expand on this somewhat, and then I'll pick up your phone calls. not only did the ex-secretary of Defense, Chris Miller, say that Trump said, okay, yeah, you can have National Guard as long as they're protecting the protesters, the rioters, the traitors, not the Capitol, not the legislators. Protect the rioters, protect the killers. That's fine. That was pretty shocking, but I thought, frankly, even more shocking was the former acting attorney general. You know, when Bill Barr resigned, and we still don't know exactly why he resigned, but it's increasingly looking like he resigned because Donald Trump tried to get him involved in the middle of one of these schemes to flip the election. But when Bill Barr resigned, this guy named Jeffrey Rosen was put in charge, who is like, you know, he was like way down the chain, and he was suddenly the acting attorney general. And yesterday, two different legislators said, "Did Trump ever tell you to steal the election?" Essentially, and he refused to answer the question. That's privileged communication with the president. I'm citing executive privilege here. Really? This is just like evil stuff. So anyway, Martin in Seattle. Hey, Martin, your thoughts. What's on your mind today?
Yes, hello, Tom. I was just going to comment on Professor Wolff, his comments. Do you think that, how do you think his ideas will work, or even the whole progressive agenda, the ideas there would work without reducing the population? Do you think population reduction would be kind of key to actually, survival of our species?
Well, I think it is key to survival of our species, and there was an interesting piece yesterday. In fact, I almost turned it into a rant over at the Financial Times about how there is concern that the United States population may be beginning a slow and steady decline, how this is going on in China.
World population will probably peak about 2030 or 2050 and then decline. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's the general consensus, but it's already started. You know, it's not a total population decline, but the aging are becoming a larger percentage of the population in China. This happened in Japan a decade ago. It's starting to happen in the United States. I think it's a good thing, not a bad thing. I think it increases the demand for labor at the low end of the age scale, which means that wages will go up, which I think is a good thing. I think it could revive the middle class. I realize that all the right-wing economists are all flipped out about it. I think it means that we consume fewer resources. I think in general it is a good thing.
One thing, Tom, with the reduction in population, it would also put more pressure on us to find a different system of economics, because the one we have now is based on eternal growth.
Correct. And although I don't think that it needs to be that different, I think that what it's going to do is it's going to change the incentives. And like I said, you're going to have more demand for lower wage labor, for example. More demand for younger labor, and that demand is going to drive up the price of that labor, and that could create a whole new middle class, essentially. It was demand. There's an argument made, and there's some truth to this. It's not the answer. It's a part of the answer. But there's an argument made that after World War II, there was actually a shortage of labor in the United States, in large part because women left the workforce and got pregnant and had babies. I mean, the so-called baby boom. Why the boomer generation, and that the result of that. That shortage of labor was one of the main reasons why the middle class grew so fast and got so wealthy. And that as the baby boomers came into the labor force in the 1970s and the 1980s, that was when wages started leveling off, because all of a sudden there were more than enough workers and employers no longer had to compete and they no longer had to pay higher prices. Reducing population would take us back to that situation after World War II.
Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So, it's all theoretical, and it's probably something that would be interesting to discuss with Professor Wolff. We'll be back. Barry at River Forest, your call is next.
In the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, our book is by Frantz Fanon, and it's The Wretched of the Earth. This is from the chapter on national culture on page 145. It sort of reads like Thomas Paine, actually. Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it in relative opacity. In the underdeveloped countries, preceding generations have simultaneously resisted the insidious agenda of colonialism and paved the way for the emergence of the current struggles. Now that we are in the heat of combat, we must shed the habit of decrying the efforts of our forefathers or feigning incomprehension at their silence or passiveness. They fought as best they could with the weapons they possessed at the time, and if their struggle did not reverberate throughout the international arena, the reason should be attributed not so much to a lack of heroism, but to a fundamentally different international situation. More than one colonized subject had to say, "We've had enough." More than one tribe had to rebel. More than one peasant revolt had to be quelled. More than one demonstration had to be repressed for us to stand firm, certain of our victory. For those of us who are determined to break the back of colonialism, our historic mission is to authorize every revolt, every desperate act, and every attack aborted or drowned in blood. In this chapter, we'll analyze the fundamental issue of the legitimate claim to a nation. The political party that mobilizes the people, however, is little concerned with this issue of legitimacy. Political parties are concerned solely with daily reality, and it is in the name of this reality, in the name of this immediacy which influences the present and future of men and women, that they make their call to action. The political party may very well speak of the nation in emotional terms, but it is primarily interested in getting the people who are listening to understand that they must join in the struggle if they quite simply want to exist. We now know that in the first phase of the national struggle, colonialism attempts to diffuse nationalist demands by manipulating economic doctrine. At the first sign of a dispute, colonialism feigns comprehension by acknowledging with ostentatious humility that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment that requires major social and economic reforms. And it is true that certain spectacular measures, such as the opening of work sites for the unemployed here and there, delay the formation of a national consciousness by a few years. But sooner or later, colonialism realizes it is incapable of achieving a program of socioeconomic reforms that would satisfy the aspirations of the colonized masses. Even when it comes to filling their bellies, colonialism proves to be inherently powerless. The colonial state very quickly discovers that any attempt to disarm the national parties at a purely economic level would be tantamount to practicing in the colonies what it did not want to do in its own territory. And it is no coincidence that today the doctrine of Cartierism is on the rise just about everywhere. Cartier's bitter disillusionment with France's stubborn determination to retain ties with people it will have to feed, whereas so many French citizens are in dire straits, reflects colonialism's inability to transform itself into a nonpartisan aid program. Hence, once again, no need to waste time repeating, better to go hungry with dignity than to eat one's fill in slavery. On the contrary, we must persuade ourselves that colonialism is incapable of procuring for colonized people the material conditions likely to make them forget their quest for dignity. Once colonialism is understood where its social reform tactics would lead it, back come the old reflexes of adding police reinforcements, dispatching troops, and establishing a regime of terror better suited to its interests and its psychology. Within the political parties, or rather parallel to them, we find the cultured class of colonized intellectuals. The recognition of a national culture and its right to exist represent their favorite stomping ground. Whereas the politicians integrate their action in the present, the intellectuals place themselves in the context of history. Faced with the colonized intellectuals' debunking of the colonist theory of a pre-colonial barbarism, colonialism's response is mute. It is especially mute since the ideas put forward by the young colonized intelligentsia are widely accepted by metropolitan specialists. It is in fact now commonly recognized that for several decades, numerous European researchers have widely rehabilitated African, Mexican, and Peruvian civilizations. Some have been surprised by the passion invested by the colonized intellectuals in their defense of a national culture. But those who consider this passion exaggerated are strangely apt to forget that their psyches and their egos are conveniently safeguarded by the French or German culture, whose worth has been proven and which has gone unchallenged. I concede the fact that the actual existence of an Aztec civilization has done little to change the diet of today's Mexican peasant. I concede that whatever proof there is of the once mighty Songhai civilization does not change the fact that the Songhais today are undernourished, illiterate, abandoned to the skies and water, with a blank mind and glazed eyes. But as we have said on several occasions, this passionate quest for a national culture prior to the colonial era can be justified by the colonized intellectuals' shared interest in stepping back and taking a hard look at the Western culture in which they risk becoming ensnared. Fully aware that they're in the process of losing themselves and consequently of being lost to their people, these men work away with raging heart and furious mind to renew contact with their people's oldest inner essence, the furthest removed from colonial times. Let us delve deeper. Perhaps this passion and this rage are nurtured, or at least guided, by the secret hope of discovering, beyond the pleasant wretchedness, beyond the self-hatred, something that redeems us.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So a while ago at Davos, Michael Dell, the computer billionaire who started out selling computers out of his dorm room in college. I was running CompuServe forums back in the day. This is in the late 70s or the early 80s, and he was selling them on CompuServe in my forums. And, now he's worth billions. And somebody asked him, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is proposing a 70% tax bracket for people who make the kind of money you make. What do you think of that? And his response was, a 70% tax rate? Name a country where that ever worked. Ever. And it turns out there is such a country, and apparently Michael Dell didn't know this. I think a lot of Americans don't know this, that there was a country that had its greatest period of prosperity in its entire history with a top tax rate that was above 70%. In fact, it hit 90% for more than half the time. And that was the United States of America. It's a new video over at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Barry in River Forest, Illinois. Hey, Barry, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. Hey, listen, you're absolutely right with the corporate tax rate. But the whole thing, if only everybody knew, of course, right?
Right.
But, hey, listen, I wanted to talk to you about, I'm a retired Navy. I was over in the Far East during the 80s and 90s, Beirut and Desert Storm. And this whole idea of the media and the false equivalent that, the politicians are putting out saying that the Palestinians are the same as the Israelis, which is a false equivalent, because when I was over there and stuff like that, it was nuts. It was absolutely nuts. I was spit on. I was in Jerusalem. I was in Haifa. I was in Bosnia with the UN at the time. Back in '94 under Clinton, and Palestinians are secularists, except for Hamas. And what's more to say?
I'm not sure you can universally say that. There are plenty of Palestinians who show up to pray at the mosque or at various mosques. But what does that have to do with anything? Yeah.
I'm sorry.
What's your point, Barry? What's your point?
Well, the point I'm trying to make is that the media is distorting the whole reality of the whole thing, because Gaza Strip is 27 miles long, 7 miles wide, 2 million people. The United States and Europe has got BDS against Gaza. They can't even export or even import anything. And the life expectancy, 64% of the people in Gaza are under the age of 24.
Yeah. No, it looks to me, we're going to be talking about this in the next hour with
that's great. That's absolutely great.
With Noam Chomsky. The question that keeps coming to my mind, the media is all talking about how, will there be war between Israel and the Palestinians? And the Palestinians are all essentially within, or at least under the control of Israel. So that's sort of like asking if there's going to be war between Michigan and Detroit. And if Detroit decided that they were going to declare war on Michigan, I'm not sure you'd call that a war. I'm not sure what you'd call it.
It's a proxy. It's a proxy war.
Well, maybe. I mean, it's something. It's a conflict, certainly of some kind. But Detroit wouldn't have a chance against the state of Michigan, first of all, and secondly, like you said, I think that there is a false equivalence here. But like I said, we're going to get into that in more detail in a little bit. But your points are well made, Barry, and thank you for calling and making them. Appreciate the call. Sue Ellen in Portland. Hey, Sue Ellen, what's up?
Oh, hey, Tom. I just wanted to add something to the woman who was frustrated about the doctor's offices who won't give her information. And
Sue Ellen, if I may interrupt you. She called during the break, and so a lot of people maybe didn't hear that call. So just let me recap real quickly, and then you can tell us your story. We had a caller who called, and she called her doctor's office. She wanted to go and see the doctor and said, "Are you guys vaccinated?" And they said, "We don't have to tell you." And we can't control that. And some of our people are not vaccinated, but we're not going to tell you who, or something like that. And I replied saying, I called my chiropractor, and they all said, no, we're not going to get vaccinated. And I said, then I'm not going to come see you. I called my dentist because I've got a dental appointment coming up next week, and they said, we are all vaccinated, and in fact, we're only seeing vaccinated patients. And so I'm going to the dentist. I'm not going to the chiropractor. Now, to you, Sue Ellen.
Okay, I had the same experience calling after not going to doctor appointments for this whole year, and I got to get back. So, and then they telling me that, and if they say they won't tell me, I say, well, sorry. And I've been looking and looking. So my experience with one particular kind of specialist that I needed, that the one I used to go to, their office just flat out said they won't tell. And I sort of said, well, this isn't really fair. I mean, you asked us all these questions about COVID, how are we coughing, and all that. And they claim HIPAA, that it covers under HIPAA law. So I think I kind of got this woman laughing a bit by saying they asked if I had diarrhea in the morning. And so she finally said, oh, listen, okay, I'll send you to the manager. And the manager was actually very nice. And first she gave me the HIPAA spiel, and I gave her my spiel back that I didn't think that fit. And she said she would ask the individual, it was an ophthalmologist's office, and there were like 3 doctors in the office I wanted to go to. And she said she would ask them if they're willing to reveal. And they did. And she came back with this certain doctor is vaccinated, and he was willing to tell me that. So my
HIPAA
would be, what?
Well, HIPAA, I think it stands for Health Insurance Privacy Act, if I recall correctly, but or Health Information Privacy Act. But HIPAA doesn't say that they can't tell you. It says that your personal information is your own business, and so if you choose to reveal that to others, so like at my dentist's office, obviously, the dental hygienist, the woman who runs at the front counter, and my dentist, it's a 3-person office, it's a small office. All 3 of them have just decided we're going to tell people, and that's not a violation of HIPAA. That's a decision.
Yeah, no, I got offices like that too. They said, "Oh yeah, they're vaccinated here." So I go, "Great, I'm coming."
Yeah.
They're all different, but my I guess my suggestion that didn't come up in that other conversation is if you persist and say, "Can I talk to someone who would ask the doctor to let me know?" If at least the doctor is vaccinated. And she did, and she called me back and was really nice and gave me an appointment.
Yeah,
and,
well, that's
and
good.
May I ask
that's
you
good.
Another question?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if landlords who rent rooms in individual rooms in a house can put requiring vaccinations in their lease?
I don't know.
You don't even know? Okay.
I honestly have no idea.
Okay. I'll find it.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know where to begin with that. That would be a question for somebody who knows real estate law, I suppose.
Local law. I can find it. You know so much about a lot that I thought you might know.
Yeah, you might. I mean, it's a question you might be able to just call. You live here in Portland. Call whoever represents you on the city council, or call the mayor's office and ask them that. And they would probably know the answer to that question.
Yeah, and there might be a difference between Portland law and Oregon law too.
Exactly. But you know, they would be able to tell you. Okay, Sue Ellen, I got to move along, but thank you for the call, and great to hear from you. And all of us need to keep on this thing of I called. There was a store that I was going to go visit the other day, and actually, a liquor store down the street, and wanted to go get some gin, and I was like, "Hey, are you guys vaccinated?" And no. It's like, okay, I'm not going. Anyway. Nola in Inglewood, California. Hey, Nola, what's up?
What's up? Thank you. What's up is there's just two news stories going on together, and I'm putting the pieces together. One, I have an article here from CBS News that 9 Republican-led states are ending increased employment benefits.
Right.
And two, there's been stories in Daily Cause about, on the one hand, you have restaurant owners complaining because they don't have staff. But on the other hand, there's comments in Daily Cause saying that waitresses are thinking twice about coming back to work because the system allows employers to pay way below minimum wage because the idea is they'll make it up in tips. So I think there's two things going on.
Right, and there's not enough tips now. Yeah.
Exactly. And one, the GOP are hoping to placate the restaurant owners by saying, see what we're doing? We're forbidding people to lay about and not go back to work, even though, according to CBS News, the studies show that there's no correlation between increased
this has always been the Republican mythology, Nola. Forgive the interruption, but we just have 25 seconds. This has always been their mythology, is that unemployment benefits make people lazy. Now, if you cut taxes for billionaires so that they get money when they're not working, that doesn't make them lazy. That makes them more willing to create jobs. But if you give unemployment to unemployed people, that makes them lazy and they won't work. It's nonsense. It's been debunked hundreds of times. There's no proof for it. And you're absolutely right that there are either 9 or 11 states that are rejecting the additional unemployment benefits, using this as their excuse. I think they're just trying to screw up their economies so that in 2022 and 2024, the Republicans can run on the Democrats didn't fix the economy. Nola, thank you for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. It's coming up about 45 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Bobby in La Puente, California. Hey, Bobby, how are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you? How's your shoulder?
It is slowly getting better. It's not in a sling right now, but it's going to be in a sling for the rest of the day. I'm slowly getting there, step by step. So I'm not as freaked out as I was. No, I'm not going to do the surgery.
I've had 5. No surgeries. Man. I've had 5.
Yeah.
So anyway, my topic.
Go ahead.
Hang in there. Anyway, Ronald Reagan, you read the sins of humanity, when he traded arms for hostages. I learned this at KPFK, so I like how you pointed out. Any one of those sins affected me and my family. That's my brother, right? When he let out the patients out of mental hospitals, right? When he was governor, and I guess it continues. My brother could not handle the outside world. We were all traumatized to a certain point. Him, fear of people, places, and things. So when he was locked up, he excelled. I never realized that there was no pressure. And then, he won awards. Freddie, wow. And then they let him out, and boom, he could not handle the outside world. It was ugly.
Yeah.
And then you pointed out Reagan. I hated the guy, but they had to learn to forgive him, because look what happened to him, Alzheimer's. Never wished on him, but for people to understand. And his policies still affect us to this day. Breaking the unions. You know what I'm saying, Tom? There's no compassion. Republican parties, even like the vaccines, right? The meetings, 12-step. I don't need to go, but people need them and want to. And I ask, you vaccinated? No. I don't get these folks. I don't get them. I never graduated any of this. Maybe I was touched with compassion. They tell me empathy, so that's okay. Humility, and, that's what I try to learn every day. And I think you and your callers, you're an example. My granddaughter goes to school, and she fights it. I got to go to school 9 a.m. My granddaughter knows you. She knows Tom, so she knows I go to school. It is. Thank you for the learning and your callers. All right, Tom, so keep it up. Keep on pushing.
Thank you, Bobby. I think that, your point is really, really well made. In fact, your multiple points. Number one, that Reagan just, gutted America, arguably thinking he was doing the right thing, which is a whole separate conversation. I don't think Ronald Reagan ever thought of himself as an evil person. Although I think some of the people who were manipulating him may have considered themselves that way and didn't care. But he, as president, threw 40,000 people out of mental hospitals. As governor of California, it was a larger number than that, as I recall. And there's a link in my article today to those specific statistics. And it's such a tragedy. It is such a tragedy because there are some among us who are so wounded by the world or have been so wounded by whatever. It's that they just can't deal with the outside world, and they end up living in tents beside the highway. And and I realize there are some people who are living in those tents because they just have no options because capitalism has failed them, which is a whole separate conversation. But a large portion, a significant portion of the homeless population is also the mentally ill population. And Reagan ended essentially the idea in America that we should be taking care of mentally ill people. And in fact, mental illness is an exclusion in most insurance policies, or at least it used to be before Obamacare. So spot on. Bobby, I got to run, but thank you. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. We have a new video up over at ThomHartmann.com about conspiracy theories. Abby Richards came up with a kind of a hierarchy of conspiracies, maybe a variation on the old Maslow hierarchy. And it goes from actual conspiracies to maybe this was a conspiracy, maybe not, we have questions, to this is kind of crazy stuff, but who knows, flying saucers, for example, to actual science denial, conspiracy theories that actually serve to promote the interests of a particular industry or wealthy individuals, to the totally crazy stuff, the flat earth, the reptilian overlords, and all that kind of thing, conspiracy theories that can do tremendous damage. And, one of those being one of the conspiracy theories that, brought two Republicans into Congress this year. So anyhow, I lay the whole thing out with a new video for our supporters over at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and John in Center Ossipee, New Hampshire. Hey, John, how are you? What's up?
Good. How are you?
Fine, thanks. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I just want to correct on one thing. Reagan doesn't actually care about anybody except for corporations.
It may be. It may be. There was this theory, what I was talking about, John, if I could just take a minute here, and then I'll give you all the time you want. But there was this theory that was laid out in 1951 in this book, The Conservative Mind by Russell Kirk, that if the middle class continued to grow as rapidly as it was growing in 1951, there had never been a middle class in the history of the world that was more than 50% of the population. And we were approaching that at that point in time. And his theory was that if the middle class becomes 50, 55, 60, 65% of the population, that if the rabble feels that empowered, that you would see women in rebellion, you would see young people refusing to acknowledge the authority of their elders, You would see workers rising up against people, and you would see minorities demanding equal rights. And all four of those things would lead to social chaos and the disintegration and ultimate destruction of the United States of America. When Russell Kirk laid that out in 51, everybody laughed at him, except Barry Goldwater. And there were a bunch of conservatives throughout the 50s and the early 60s who thought that Russell Kirk was right. But it was very few. In fact, Dwight Eisenhower came out and said he was stupid. So then in 61, they legalized the birth control pill. By 64, you've got a full-blown women's movement going on. The middle class has surpassed 50%. You've got young people saying about the war in Vietnam, no, I'm not going to go, and burning their draft cards. You've got women burning bras. You've got African Americans, the civil rights movement, getting, really getting some steam under it and protesting all around the country, and in some cases in response to police killings, even, burning down buildings and things. And at that point in the 60s, the conservative movement, which Reagan was part of at that point in time, the conservative movement looked back at Kirk and said, oh my God, this guy was absolutely right. We've got to cut the middle class back down below 50%, or the country is going to continue to be in social chaos. And that was Reagan's job. And he did that job. We 10 years ago, maybe it was 11 years ago this year, the middle class in America officially became less than 50% of the American population, from a high in the low 60s back in the 70s and 80s. And, and you see less, quote, social unrest in some ways. But it was a BS theory. But, I think Reagan thought he was doing the right thing. Anyhow, to you, John, we have 2 minutes. I'm sorry. It's all yours.
No, by all means. I mean, that's a great learning lesson. In fact, I think a lot of our problems today are originating from that Reaganism philosophy that was laid out. For us to basically swallow down and choke on it and believe it until it was too late. It's sad. It's just sad. But I just wanted to bring up one other thing, and that was the vaccines. Our state house in this state is nuts. We have a lot of state representatives that are just anti-vaxxers, and it's just insane. So, like, you got half the state that's north that anti-vaxxers. You got the south that are pro-vaccine. It's like a small little civil war.
Yeah. I lived in New Hampshire for years. I know the state quite well.
Yeah, it's a beautiful state. It's called live free or die for a reason, I guess.
Yeah, we lived up near Plymouth and, up in the north, and it was pretty conservative up there. It was a very, very, very right wing. And we're seeing this nationwide. I mean, half of the Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives refuse to tell whether they've been vaccinated or not. Half of them. It's like they're trying to encourage vaccine hesitancy because they think it'll hurt Biden. Which is just crazy. I mean, it's just crazy. You're in favor of letting people die or get sick and be permanently disabled in order to try to stop Joe Biden. It's just nuts. John, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Teresa in Augusta, Georgia. Teresa, we have a minute to the break. What's up?
Yes, I just want to ask you a quick question and make a weird comment. When they were talking about the population, when y'all were talking about Professor Wolff was talking about the population, that if the population decreases, then it would force the economy as far as jobs and pay and everything to increase and build back to the middle class. And, anyway, I'm wondering,
that's my theory.
Has anybody put together any kind of ideas that maybe once COVID-19 hit the United States, and the Trump people figured out that it was killing more minorities than it was white people, that was their subtle form of eugenics, and that there's
yes. I have written 3 articles saying that, Teresa. And in fact, if you go to HartmannReport.com and just scroll down about 2-3 weeks, you will find, we must never forget what happened on April 7th. April 7th was the day that the Trump administration, April 7th of last year, of 2020, was the day that the Trump administration made that decision between Donald Trump and Jared Kushner. And we have to keep reminding people of that.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code TOM. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartman. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
Our book for the book report today. Our book for the book report today is Taking Bullets, Terrorism and Black Life in 21st Century America, Confronting White Nationalism, Supremacy, Privilege, Plutocracy, and Oligarchy, a Poet's Representation and Challenge by Haki R. Madhubuti. He writes, this is from the chapter, page 27, the chapter Terror in the Midst of Prayer and Empire. In our perpetual state of national mourning, where our eyes are watered out and our hearts cease to heal at the rate the Creator meant them to, we hold hands in profound silence as we remember the Mother Emanuel 9 of Charleston, South Carolina, those 9 mothers, fathers, sisters, and brothers. Even before burying, before black earth covered their caskets, too many ministers, media pundits, and plain white and black folks downgraded the terror that quickened their deaths of our finest in this land to the mental illness and race hatred, in quotes, of a single young white man. He may have acted alone, but he was not alone in his thinking, encouragement, gathering of arms, warped consciousness, confirmation, or ahistorical views, and yeses from the millions in the nation who proudly wear and display the Confederate flag above their hearts and fly it in all of its traitorous glory over a state capitol and other institutions. Again, we find ourselves at war with history and culture, entertaining another call for a national conversation on race and a president weary of trying to make sense of and comfort the grief-stricken nation with words from the highest office of the land. This was written while Obama was president. These are the facts, not an opinion or the ignorant ranting of compromised preachers and television pundits. A 21-year-old white man, a citizen of South Carolina, walked into the sacred and spiritual home of the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church of Charleston, the historic home of black liberation fighter Denmark Vesey, and fatally killed 9 of its members, including the pastor, during Bible study. This was a pure act of domestic terrorism. A modern-day lynching by a young white nationalist who coolly and calmly assassinated 9 black members of Mother Emanuel. Domestic violence and acts of terrorism are on the rise in the United States, as detailed by Charles Kurzman and Daniel Schanzer in their New York Times op-ed, The Other Threat, where they state that, quote, the main terrorist threat in the United States is not from violent Muslim extremists, but from right-wing extremists, end quote. In their national research, local police agencies across the country identified, quote, the militias, neo-Nazis, and sovereign citizens as the major threat the nation faces in regard to extremism, end quote. All of this is homegrown with international connections. Morris Dees and J. Richard Cohen of the Southern Poverty Law Center also writes in the New York Times article, Racists Without Borders, that, quote, Americans tend to view attacks like the mass murder in Charleston as isolated hate crimes, the work of a deranged racist or a group of zealots lashing out in anger unconnected to a broader movement. This view we can no longer afford to indulge. When, according to survivors, Mr. Roof told the victims at the prayer meeting that black people were, quote, taking over the country, he was expressing sentiments that unite white nationalists from the United States and Canada to Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. Unlike those of the civil rights era, whose main goal was to maintain Jim Crow in the American South, today's white supremacists don't see borders. They see a white tribe under attack by people of color across the globe. The end of white rule in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, and South Africa, they believe, foreshadowed an apocalyptic future for all white people, a white genocide that must be stopped before it's too late. End of quote. The internationalization of terrorism is not a foreign theory in today's social media world. Dees and Cohen will be speaking at a conference in Budapest about this transnational white supremacism that is emerging as the world grows more connected technologically. The message of white genocide is spreading. Also, David J. Whitaker's Terrorism, Understanding the Global Threat, gives another view. Clearly, our rush to forgive this mass murderer within 96 hours of this supreme tragedy is misguided, anti-human, and does not allow for properly grieving the fallen. As perfectly scripted, displaying the permanent effectiveness of Christian acculturation on the Sunday, June 21st, 2015 morning services of Mother Emanuel Church, the black Christians out-Christianed their white brothers and sisters. Before the morning sermon, the presiding elder, Reverend Norvell Goff Sr., found it necessary to thank the local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies for doing their job. He also stated, quote, a lot of folks expected us to do something strange and break out in a riot. Well, they just don't know us. We are people of faith, end quote. I find this statement inappropriate, insensitive, and ahistorical, implying, whether he meant it or not, that the recent uprising and rebellions in Ferguson, New York, Cleveland, and other parts of the nation were riots and did not include black people of faith, and that somehow they were strange in their social, political, and economic activism. Informed people do not riot against injustice or white terrorism. They study, organize, and strategically struggle at all levels, in the streets, on the campus, in front of the White House, and in corporate boardrooms. Dylan Roof stated his stated intentions were to start a race war, and informed black leadership understands that we cannot pray this away or appeal to any law enforcement agency that all across the country, including Charleston, has been seriously compromised. To label black reaction to murder, terrorism, deep unemployment, substandard housing, etc. as riot is to blame for taking bullets.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Noam Chomsky was going to drop by in this hour, and Joyce just spoke with his family, and there's been an emergency, and he's not available to drop by the show today. So another time. So it's just you and me for this hour. A couple of things that I wanted to talk about. Number one, the CDC is loosening up mask requirements. There's going to be a formal announcement. We've heard Dr. Fauci and others making sort of informal statements over the last couple of days. If you are fully vaccinated, 2 weeks past your second vaccine, if you had the 2-dose vaccine, then you need not wear a mask in public. Fauci said, unless you're going to be around a lot of people, or real, jammed up. Really what this is, in my opinion, and again, I'm not a physician and this isn't medical advice. I'm sharing with you what I'm reading in the popular press and in the medical literature that I read, and is that the rare breakthrough cases, and that's frankly what people who are vaccinated have to fear. In the rare breakthrough cases, and a breakthrough being defined as a person who's fully vaccinated getting sick with COVID. In those rare cases, it appears, and again, there's not good data on this yet. They're just compiling this now. This is early stages. But it appears that the thing that provokes the breakthrough, yes, there are some people that the vaccine just didn't work so well on because they were immunocompromised, or there was something going on with them, or they just don't react to vaccine, whatever. I mean, there's some small subset of the population that, or they're taking immunosuppressive drugs, and there's a bunch of those on the market. So they didn't develop the immunity that they should have had. There's that. But mostly it has to do with the level of the virus that you get, that you inhale, which is the principal way it gets into the body. We know now that this is a virus that pretty much does not transmit. Like flu, you can get it from surfaces, right? It's why they, in a lot of public bathrooms, they no longer have doors with doorknobs, because the flu, among other things, I mean, E. coli and other things, would get on it. And so now, you just go in and walk through the maze to get into the restroom. COVID doesn't get spread that way. It doesn't get spread by contact. You don't have to wash your food anymore. But it is through the air. So apparently, if somebody just kind of walks by while they're breathing and they've got COVID, and you just get a few viruses inhaled, your immune system can easily handle that. But if you're up close with them and they're really blowing out the viruses and you're inhaling a lot of them, hundreds of millions or billions of them, then your immune system just doesn't have the capacity to deal with that, and the breakthrough happens. So, basically what he's saying is, yeah, you can go outside without a mask anymore. Louise and I have not worn a mask on our walks for about a week now. And most of the people we see outside are not wearing masks, but we're all still avoiding each other by about 6 feet. We're still trying to, and if I'm walking, if I'm forced to walk close to somebody, I hold my breath. And maybe I'm being OCD or crazy about this, but if I was going like to a farmer's market or something, where there's a lot of people and you're going to bump into people and stuff like that, I would still wear a mask. Just me. I'm not, again, this is not medical advice. I'm just telling you, my thoughts on it. But generally speaking, I think, it's we're getting to the point where we can be a lot more reasonable about this and a lot more rational about it. A couple of other things I wanted to mention. One of the big freakouts over the last 2 days, there was a big decline in the stock market. It's back up today. In fact, it's back up, well over 1%. I think those losses are going to be more than made up. But the freakout that provoked that, and a lot of it was coming from Republicans, was, oh my God, inflation. And where is the inflation coming? Oh my God, the inflation's coming because Joe Biden is spending money. Well, number one, government spending doesn't usually produce inflation. It's shortage of essential goods that produces inflation. So the logic doesn't even, comport with reality, broadly speaking. But there has been an increase in food prices, a substantial increase in food prices in the last 6 months. And there has been a substantial increase in gas prices. And so comparing this year's prices to last year's prices, May to May, or April to April is the more common comparison, is what people have been doing. But that's doing it all wrong. Because last April, there was a collapse in food prices. People weren't going to the supermarket. There was an increase in toilet paper prices. But, food prices actually softened considerably throughout last spring and summer. There was nowhere near as much food waste. About a third of all the food purchased in the United States is wasted. A lot of that has to do with restaurants. And because restaurants were not serving food, an awful lot of food waste was not happening. And then you had the whole thing with China saying that they weren't buying stuff from us. And so there was, it was just a whole bunch of things. So if we compare our prices now with our prices 2 years ago instead of last year, then what we see is that over the last 2 years, we've seen inflation that's run a little over 2%, about 3%, 2% over the last year, about 1% before that, the year before that, which is totally within the realm of normal. Now, there are some raw material prices that are going up. We have a chip shortage. that is driving up the cost of, I mean, that's a raw material for manufacturing things like cars and smart appliances and stuff, so those prices are going up. We are seeing increases in labor prices. This is what Alan Greenspan loves to call wage inflation. But wage inflation typically doesn't cause inflation throughout the economy. It usually reflects it. You see demands for higher wages as a result of inflation, and that's not what's going on right now. What's going on right now is that we're seeing some increase in wages as a consequence, number one, of states simply getting rational and raising minimum wages. Number two, companies responding to the $15 minimum, nationwide campaign and raising wages. And number three, a lot of people unwilling to come back into the labor market until they know that they're not going to get COVID, until they're fully vaccinated and they know that most of the people that they're going to be interacting with are vaccinated, or at least, it's a safe place. And so it's a workers' marketplace, not an employer's marketplace, which means that wages are temporarily high. But again, compare those wages with a couple of years ago. They haven't gone up that much. And compare them going forward, or compare the trend lines going forward, they're almost certainly going to start going down as unemployment benefits run out. And this is the Republican shtick. It's the unemployment benefits that are keeping people out of the labor market. Not true. But what they are doing is they're giving people the ability to say, I think I'll wait another month or two until I really feel safe. And that's not an unreasonable position, by the way. We're going back into the studio next week. So we're going to start doing the show live again from our studio in next week because, finally we're all vaccinated and we feel safe. And so, this is slowly going to happen, and it's going to happen over the next couple of months. So I'm not really concerned about all this economic dislocation that everybody's all hysterical about. On the other hand, CEO pay has exploded. Average CEO compensation in the last, since 2019, has gone up 29%, whereas the median worker pay has gone down 2% since 2019. The average CEO to median worker pay ratio is now 830 to 1. At Hilton, it's 1,953 times to 1. At the auto part maker Aptiv, it's 5,294 to 1. And at Under Armour, it's 1,104 to 1. So there's something we can do about that. I'll tell you about that after the break.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And I will pick up your phone calls after the break, too. There's so much we've talked about, so much on the table. Also, are you having problems with your doctor's offices refusing to tell you that they're vaccinated? And welcome back. James in Clear Lake, California. Hey, James, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Well, first of all, I'm from Clear Lake Oaks. And second,
Oaks.
You said that...
Okay.
You said that we no longer have to wash our food. Two questions on that. Does that apply to everything we bring in the house? And is that in a CDC guideline?
Yes. Yeah, the CDC, this was maybe a month or two, actually maybe 2 or 3 months ago, they announced that the evidence of transmission of COVID via surfaces is almost entirely lacking. They can't even find good examples of it, good cases of it. Now, we still, of course, want to wash the food when it comes into our house just for normal hygiene and in case it's got nasty bacteria on it. And it's always good to wash your hands and wash surfaces that a lot of people touch so that you don't get the flu, for example, or even the common cold. But COVID, don't worry about COVID, and you don't need to scrub your vegetables and be hyper careful about handling things any longer, James.
Thank you very much.
Cleared up for you?
I missed that report. I've still been watching until today.
Yeah. Well, we've been careful, and we used to, like, even if we got like a pizza, from delivered to us, we would stick it in the oven and recook it a little bit just to try to kill anything that might be on it. We put it in the box, in the oven. We no longer do that, and we're taking it easy on that stuff because of those reports. James, thanks for the call. Elise in Portland. Hey, Elise, what's on your mind? Elise? Okay, Elise is not listening to her phone. She's listening to her radio. You gotta listen to your phone, otherwise you're missing what's going on. Ann in Marietta, Ohio. Hey, Ann, what's on your mind today?
From delivered to us, we would stick it in the oven
Man?
and recook it a little bit just to try to
Oh
kill
my
anything
goodness.
that might be on
2 in a
it.
row of people who are just okay. I'm going to put Ann on hold here too. Ann's on line 1. If you want to check that out, Joyce. Howard in New York City. Hey, Howard, what's on your mind today?
Hi. Yeah, I think the Democrats are incredibly remiss and derelict in not countering the Republican propaganda. I think it's vitally important to do that as it is fighting the pandemic. I have 4 ideas which they should be doing. Just to terrify the audience, if Trump gets another 4 years, it's going to be, Trump is like Joseph Goebbels with his propaganda. He's incredibly efficient. And I think it's not going to be a Trump presidency. I think it's going to be a Trump dynasty where he'll get his family involved. So my 4 ideas are this. 1, they should set up a cabinet-level post called Secretary of Democracy. Underneath that, you need 3 strong branches. The first is you have to do what the Russians did with Facebook to counter to get their propaganda into when they helped Trump get elected. With, as I said, the second thing you need to do is you have to set up a Beto O'Rourke and a Stacey Abrams to do it locally. I don't care if it's $1 billion, you train 100 people. And the last thing I would do, like the old Radio America, they had $28 million budget. They had 75 stations. I would not put liberals on it. I would put conservatives who had credibility.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Well, the Confederacy continues to live. Governor Tate Reeves, the governor of Mississippi, just signed a proclamation making April the Confederate Heritage Month in Mississippi. That's kind of the bad news. The good news is that it didn't get published on the state's websites. It got published over on Facebook, where there's a good contingent of racists and neo-Confederates to begin with. But what does this say about America? That a part of the country that literally was a police state, a fascist police state, there was no democracy left by 1861 in the South. It was completely controlled by a few thousand families who owned these massive plantations. And in my little riff that's over at ThomHartmann.com for the supporters of our program, I go through some of the details of it. Just the sad, sad history of the South. It is really worth checking out. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I'm so glad this is the last week we're doing the show remotely. My apologies to a couple of callers who, I wasn't getting an immediate response from them. And now I'm looking at my software here and seeing that I've got, I was up to almost 3 seconds of latency, which means I would say something and you would hear it 3 seconds later. It's creeping down toward 1 second, so we may talk over each other or whatever. We will reconnect, and I'll get that latency back down to the norm of 1/4 of a second. Or latency is a fancy word for delay, right? The time delay. During the next break, we'll be able to do it, but I can't do it right now. I'd have to disconnect from the show. So picking up your phone calls, Elise in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Elise, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. You were talking about international criminals who don't pay taxes, right? They're in tax havens. Well, Republicans don't even want to pay their fair share, and they certainly don't want to pay don't want an increase in taxes to pay for Biden's proposals. And how many of them are millionaires and billionaires? I know there are quite a few millionaires in both the House and the Senate. I don't know about billionaires, but anyway. So I think the first time I called, I said that we need to go after tax havens, and that would take care of the international criminals and the millionaires and billionaires. But I know it'd have to be an international effort, but I don't see any way out of this unless the tax havens go down.
Well, and I agree with you, Elise, and this is something that Joe Biden has said that he is putting at the top of his list. Elizabeth Warren has been talking about this, and Bernie Sanders for years. All these tax havens, and I think that the UN, the IMF, I think some of the international agencies that deal with these issues, they're recognizing what the coronavirus crisis did around the world is it demonstrated the importance of having functional governments, having functional infrastructure, having the ability to, particularly public health infrastructure, having the ability to deal with the crisis, but also, transportation infrastructure and other things, having the ability to deal with a crisis. And that the way that you pay for those things, the way that you fund them is, quite very straightforward, very simple. You fund them by taxes. And so as long as this massive tax cheating, $7 trillion in the United States, maybe $50 or $100 trillion in the rest of the developed world, around the world, and God only knows what's going on in the third world and in the old second world, the former Soviet bloc. I think it's a good thing that they're talking about cracking down on it. So I'm with you, Elise. Elise, thank you very much for your comments and spot on what you said. Ann in Marietta, Ohio. Ann, you are on the air. No, Ann? I'm assuming that it's just taking a second here for her to hear me, but maybe not. Okay, I'll put Ann on hold. She's on line 1, in fact, Joyce, if you want to check it out. Daniel in Bakersfield, California. Daniel, can you hear me? What's up?
Yes, how you doing, Professor Thom?
Good. So what's on your mind, Daniel?
Hey, you were talking about opening up the economy, and I think one of the things I think Bernie and Elizabeth talked about it, not quite in big detail, but it's just to lower the Medicare to 55, and that would open up a lot of high-end jobs where these young people, 30, 40. Early 50s, I guess, late 40s, are trying to get into corporations. And a lot of us, that are that age are working just for the Medicare or for the insurance for the company because you can't afford it,
Yep.
Or you don't want to spend all your money, or
absolutely.
what happens if you, God forbid, if you get sick,
Yeah, and I've been saying this for a long time, Daniel. In fact, I wrote a chapter about it in my book, Rebooting the American Dream, the book that Bernie Sanders sent to all 100 senators. And there's an entire chapter in there about lowering the Social Security age and the Medicare age to 55 or 50. And the theory being that, only about half, arguably, maybe even less than that, of the people who are eligible would actually take advantage of that. Because a lot of people enjoy working. I mean, I'm well over 65 and I'm still working, and I'm loving it. And so, there are people who enjoy their jobs and they'll stay with it. But for those people who really would like to retire, who are ready to retire, what it does is it opens up jobs for younger people, for people in their 20s and 30s who are coming into the job market. And so, if we could get half the people who are in their late 50s and early 60s to half of them to retire, with Social Security and Medicare, I think it'd be a good thing for the economy. I think it'd be a really good thing for the economy. So spot on, Daniel. I think you're absolutely right. We're going to reconnect and get our latency problem under control here on the other side of this break, and so that I can continue to pick up your phone conversations and we can actually have a back and forth in real time. So stick around. Back with your calls at 202-808-9925 right after
You're
this.
listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
What are the issues of the day that are stuck in your craw? We'll be right back. Our book for the book report today. Our book for the book report today is Taking Bullets, Terrorism and Black Life in 21st Century America, Confronting White Nationalism, Supremacy, Privilege, Plutocracy, and Oligarchy, A Poet's Representation and Challenge by Haki R. Madhuburi. He writes, this is from the chapter, page 27, the chapter Terror in the Midst of Prayer and Empire. In our perpetual state of national mourning, where our eyes are watered out and our hearts cease to heal at the rate the Creator meant them to, we hold hands in profound silence as we remember the Mother Emanuel 9 of Charleston, South Carolina, those 9 mothers, fathers, sisters, and brothers. Even before burying, before black earth covered their caskets, too many ministers, media pundits, and plain white and black folks downgraded the terror that quickened their deaths of our finest in this land to the mental illness and race hatred, in quotes, of a single young white man. He may have acted alone, but he was not alone in his thinking, encouragement, gathering of arms, warped consciousness, confirmation, or ahistorical views, and yeses from the millions in the nation who proudly wear and display the Confederate flag above their hearts and fly it in all of its traitorous glory over a state capitol and other institutions. Again, we find ourselves at war with history and culture, entertaining another call for a national conversation on race and a president weary of trying to make sense of and comfort the grief-stricken nation with words from the highest office of the land. This was written while Obama was president. These are the facts, not an opinion or the ignorant ranting of compromised preachers and television pundits. A 21-year-old white man, a citizen of South Carolina, walked into the sacred and spiritual home of the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church of Charleston, the historic home of black liberation fighter Denmark Vesey, and fatally killed 9 of its members, including the pastor, during Bible study. This was a pure act of domestic terrorism. A modern-day lynching by a young white nationalist who coolly and calmly assassinated 9 black members of Mother Emanuel. Domestic violence and acts of terrorism are on the rise in the United States, as detailed by Charles Kurzman and Daniel Schanzer in their New York Times op-ed, The Other Threat, where they state that, quote, the main terrorist threat in the United States is not from violent Muslim extremists, but from right-wing extremists, end quote. In their national research, local police agencies across the country identified, quote, the militias, neo-Nazis, and sovereign citizens as the major threat the nation faces in regard to extremism, end quote. All of this is homegrown with international connections. Morris Dees and J. Richard Cohen of the Southern Poverty Law Center also writes in the New York Times article, Racists Without Borders, that, quote, Americans tend to view attacks like the mass murder in Charleston as isolated hate crimes, the work of a deranged racist or a group of zealots lashing out in anger unconnected to a broader movement. This view we can no longer afford to indulge. When, according to survivors, Mr. Roof told the victims at the prayer meeting that black people were, quote, taking over the country, he was expressing sentiments that unite white nationalists from the United States and Canada to Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. Unlike those of the Civil Rights era, whose main goal was to maintain Jim Crow in the American South, today's white supremacists don't see borders. They see a white tribe under attack by people of color across the globe. The end of white rule in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, and South Africa, they believe, foreshadowed an apocalyptic future for all white people, a white genocide that must be stopped before it's too late. End of quote. The internationalization of terrorism is not a foreign theory in today's social media world. Dees and Cohen will be speaking at a conference in Budapest about this transnational white supremacism that is emerging as the world grows more connected technologically. The message of white genocide is spreading. Also, David J. Whitaker's Terrorism, Understanding the Global Threat, gives another view. Clearly, our rush to forgive this mass murderer within 96 hours of this supreme tragedy is misguided, anti-human, and does not allow for properly grieving the fallen. As perfectly scripted, displaying the permanent effectiveness of Christian acculturation on the Sunday, June 21st, 2015 morning services at Mother Emanuel Church, the black Christians out-Christianed their white brothers and sisters. Before the morning sermon, the presiding elder, Reverend Norvell Goff Sr., found it necessary to thank the local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies for doing their job. He also stated, quote, "A lot of folks expected us to do something strange and break out in a riot. Well, they just don't know us. We are people of faith," end quote. I find this statement inappropriate, insensitive, and ahistorical, implying, whether he meant it or not, that the recent uprising and rebellions in Ferguson, New York, Cleveland, and other parts of the nation were riots and did not include black people of faith, and that somehow they were strange in their social, political, and economic activism. Informed people do not riot against injustice or white terrorism. They study, organize, and strategically struggle at all levels, in the streets, on the campus, in front of the White House, and in corporate boardrooms. Dylan Roof his stated intentions were to start a race war. Informed black leadership understands that we cannot pray this away or appeal to any law enforcement agency, but all across the country, including Charleston. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. We're trying to provide the very best content that we can for you at Hartmann Report and over at ThomHartmann.com. And on Hartmann Report, every day, 6 days a week, I write an op-ed. Very often they're my rants, also for the radio and television program. And it's ad-free, commercial-free. It's free. You can sign up. It'll get pushed into your email box. Check it out at HartmannReport.com. And, of course, over at ThomHartmann.com, we have our weekly video that we put up every week that does a deeper dive for people who are members of our program of ThomHartmann.com. And the one this week is about this Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, SIGAR, their new report that almost 20 million Afghans are on the verge of starvation and nobody's talking about it. Check it out at ThomHartmann.com. So the CDC just announced that if you are vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask indoors either. Now that, I'm assuming that there are some assumptions in there like, there is some reasonable ventilation or, well, who knows? I don't know. I'm going to have to read this after we get off the air. But that's the Chiron on CNN right now. Vaccinated people can go without masks indoors and outdoors. And, but let's be careful and rational, but let's go for it. Matt in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Matt, it says you disagree with me here. About what?
Hi, Tom. I'm a restaurant owner, and, hiring people right now is extremely difficult. We're having a very hard time. If you go and look at every single restaurant, they've got a sign out front that says now hiring. We had over 100 applications that were submitted. Yeah, over 100 applications submitted. We were able to hire 8 people out of that 100. And a lot of them are telling us flat out that they're only applying because they have to. New Mexico just made it so that you have to actually look for a job now, at least 2 per week.
In order to qualify for unemployment?
In order to qualify for unemployment. Yes, sir.
Right.
And we had one guy that we were going to hire, and the minute we got him on the phone, he goes, "Yeah, I can't wait to get in there just so I can look at the young girls' butts." Now, who would say that?
Not a guy you want to hire.
Really wanted to get hired. Well, exactly.
Right.
So we've had employees that were employed with us, and we called them back, and they said, "Well, we used to work full time. We only want 1 shift a week," and then they would call out or trade their shifts off every time. So they're definitely playing the game. There is an element of that is doing that.
No, I don't disagree, Matt. And you know, and by the way, the $300 a week additional unemployment, which you only qualify for if you're already getting unemployment, which you only qualify for if you've already jumped through all the hoops of the state, and different states have different hoops, and it's you know, easier or harder in various states. But that's all scheduled to expire in September. And now you've got 11 states that have said that they're going to expire it at the end of this month, or at the end of the next month. And there have been a number of variables here that are causing dislocations in the labor market. One of them is the fact of those unemployment payments. People are not feeling the pressure to get back to work. I'll acknowledge that. That's a very temporary situation. Another is that a lot of people over the course of the last year got used to not, I was going to say not going out to restaurants every week, but, you know, sort of not buying a lot of things that they don't really, quote, need, and living a little more frugal lifestyle, and have decided that, like the person who told you, hey, you know, going forward, I'm not going to work full time, I'll work part time, because they've kind of downscaled their lives and discovered that, hey, this works for me. And then the third thing is that it's still not safe out there. I would think, particularly if I was thinking about getting a restaurant job, I know, you know, I told the story yesterday. Louise and I, day before yesterday, went to a restaurant for the first time since March of 2020. And it was great. It was one of our favorite restaurants here in town, a little Mexican restaurant that hangs out over the river. And we were sitting at a table that was 6 feet away from anybody else. We were outdoors, and still the waiter treated us like we had the plague. I mean, he was very nice, and he was a wonderful waiter, and I tipped him really well. But he wore a mask all the time. But we were not wearing masks because we were eating, and so he was very careful never to get within 3 or 4 feet of us, because we represented a possible threat to him. And so if I was looking for a job right now, you know, walking into a restaurant job where you've got a lot of people who are not wearing masks, and you have no idea if they've been vaccinated or if they're mask holes, it would give me pause, Matt. And I'm guessing that that's going to resolve itself as we hit herd immunity and as infections start to collapse, and particularly as children start getting vaccinated. But doesn't it make sense that there are multiple variables here at work?
Well, there certainly are, but to say that people aren't coming back to work because of unemployment, I mean, that is a fact. That's definitely happening. We're fortunate in New Mexico. We're one of the best states in the whole nation for our vaccination rates. And, you know, they've opened it up to everyone who wants to get it 16 years and older. So, you know, things are definitely starting to loosen up here, and our numbers are going down, and things are looking very good. But, you know, we're definitely getting from our people that we're trying to hire that they're playing the game, you know, and they don't want to work. The example I gave of the 2 people who, you know, only wanted to come back 1 day a week, they flat out told us they were doing that so they could stay under the radar and still receive unemployment. You know, I know there's people that have.
You wouldn't even be hearing from those people. Yeah, I get it. And you know, the one time in my life that I applied for unemployment was, it had to be like 1969 or 1970. And it was in Michigan, and I had to go stand in line every other week, I think, to get my check. And I had to bring proof that I had to have 3 different possible employers sign off. And I was actually looking for work at the time, by the way. I was only on unemployment for maybe a month and a half. But it was humiliating, and it was difficult. And, you know, and I get it, the states do that. I wonder if the states didn't do that, if they simply said, okay, if you don't have a job, you know, we can tell if you don't have a job or you don't have a job because you're paying taxes. If you don't have a job, you know, you get the unemployment, and you don't have to be calling Matt and pretending to apply for a job. Then the only calls you wouldn't be getting 100, you know, applications from people where, you know, 92 of them were people who were just doing the dance to get their unemployment benefits. Then you'd have a better quality of people that you could choose from, and it would make your life easier, wouldn't it?
I would hope so.
Yeah.
because we're looking
it's
at shortening our days, shortening our hours, shortening our menus. We've raised our wages $2-3 an hour across the board. We think we're attractive, but it's just tough out here finding employees.
Yeah. Well, I think that'll change, and certainly, yes, you're right. I will amend my earlier comment that there is no relationship between unemployment benefits and people being willing to work. But that said, those benefits are going to be running out, fairly soon, and I think that it's going to correlate or overlap with a general feeling of it's safe now, and I think that it's safe now is a big deal. Matt, thanks for the call. Thanks for enlightening me. Carol in Manassas, Pennsylvania. Hey, Carol, what's up?
Hi, Tom. This is regarding one of your last callers who spoke of the HIPAA Act. But first, I want to say I'm with you.
And the doctor who wouldn't say if they were vaccinated?
Right, exactly, yes. I also want to say that I'm with you on the mask business. I'm fully vaccinated now after having been in-house for, since March 10th. I think it's the same day you shut it all down.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't gone out. But I did call, and if I go out next winter, I keep an N95 in my glove compartment. And if I go in anywhere, I put that mask on. And I expect to do that all through next winter because I also don't want anything else like the flu.
Right.
But the reason
we've gone from hundreds of thousands of cases of the flu to like 3,000 cases this year. I mean, it just didn't show up, and it's because people are wearing masks.
It's amazing. Masks really work. I mean, I find them very good, and I even gave out. I bought 20 N95 masks, and I gave one of them to a clerk that I know at the Food Land where we shop, and she was really happy to get that. She was just using an old cloth mask. But anyway, as for the HIPAA Act, I called my doctor's office about 2 months ago, and I asked him if I asked the lady who answered the phone if my doctor was vaccinated. And my doctor's from India, and I've had him 15 years, and I know him rather well. But at any rate, she said, "Oh, I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that." And I said, "Why not, And she said, "Well, because of the HIPAA Act." And I said, "Oh, yeah, that's right." I said, "Well, would you pass the message on to him for me? Because I really want to know if he's vaccinated." And so it wasn't even a half hour later. He calls me, and he said not only is he vaccinated, but he wanted me to get a damn vaccination, too.
That's great. That's great. That's like my experience with my dentist. We don't even want to do dental work on people who aren't vaccinated.
Right.
Carol, thank you. Thanks for the story. Great to hear from you. Yeah, HIPAA doesn't prevent it. It's voluntary.
Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
I am calling every place we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Any place I'm thinking of visiting, I'm calling first and asking if they're vaccinated. And if they're not, I'm telling them I'm not coming. And welcome back. Ann in Marietta, Ohio. Hey, Ann, let's try it again. What's up?
All right. Well, a while ago when you were talking about vaccinations, I wanted to just let you know the New York Times magazine of this past Sunday, the whole magazine was devoted to the increase in the lifespan of everyone, and it was all about vaccinations. And the big problem that people faced, or the scientists faced, they came up with a vaccination, but people were afraid. The smallpox, for example, was not accepted until some wealthy aristocratic lady got the smallpox vaccination, and then everyone jumped on the bandwagon. But it reduced the mortality rate down to 4% from smallpox, and then it went on.
Are you talking about like hundreds of years ago?
Yeah, well, all these vaccinations, the big problem with all of them was people accepting it. And so people should look at this and say, well, look how our lifespan has increased because of these vaccinations. They're good. And then last night on PBS, they had the same kind of program about vaccinations and how it changed the lifespan. I mean, from 45 to the 70s due to vaccinations. And it was a very good point they were making. And I think it should be more advertised that vaccinations are good. I mean, measles, smallpox, polio. These are all vaccinations. Why are people afraid of COVID-19? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Well, people are afraid of it because it's a deadly disease, but afraid of the COVID-19 vaccine. They're afraid of it because they're getting lied to by people in the media, not necessarily the mainstream media, but, you know, in like on YouTube and Facebook and whatnot.
Oh,
they're getting lied to by people who
rant. Yeah. Tucker Carlson was awful. Just plain awful how he talked about it. Anyway, I just wanted to say people need to look at other sources of information besides news. Read something.
I'm with you, Ann. I don't know if you caught the conversation that Lawrence O'Donnell had with Joe Biden, President Biden, yesterday, but he asked Biden, you know, what are you going to do about all this vaccine hesitancy? And Biden kind of laughed and said, people are coming around, you know? It's not that they're, you know, there's going to be a small number of ideologues and crazies, obviously there always are, but mostly it's like people are waiting until they hear from their neighbor or their friend or their coworker or their aunt or uncle or, you know, brother or sister or brother-in-law or whatever, from somebody that they know who says, yeah, I got the vaccine and now, hey, I can go out. Now I feel safe. Now I, you know, and at that point people go, you know, the kind of the penny drops. People go, oh, yeah, okay, I should do that too.
Yeah, well, I just think there was so much publicity about from PBS and the New York Times talking about the efficacy of these vaccinations. And I guess the people who read those articles and listen to PBS or watch PBS already feel the same way. You know?
Yeah, well, it does require a certain intellect to be able to process information, you know, as opposed to just blithering. Well, and thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you. And thank you for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Stick around. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Hey, we have a new video over at ThomHartmann.com. It's about this movement that has, you know, it's being characterized in the media as being just, you know, fringe wackadoodles, crazy people on YouTube, stuff like that, who are talking about how Democrats are torturing children to get the adrenochrome out of them, and Hillary Clinton is eating babies, and the ship in the Suez Canal, and how, and the really interesting one now, how if you get the vaccine for COVID that it will change your race. Yes, something that will make white people absolutely hysterical. The problem is this isn't just the Flat Earth Society. These aren't the people that we used to laugh at. This isn't just a few crazies on the edge. They just had a convention in Oklahoma, you know, a serious convention where they were calling for Democrats to be put in front of a firing squad and shot. You need to check this out. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Chris in Glen Ellen, Illinois. Hey, Chris, what's on your mind? Thanks for listening to WCPT.
Hey, Tom.
Chris?
First, you're a genius. Can you hear me?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I do. There was a lot of road noise there, but yeah, we're good, Chris. Go for it.
Excellent. You had a restaurant owner that called pertaining about having a hard time getting employees. I spent 30 years in restaurants, 20 years managing. Plain and simple. Servers, bartenders, they don't get paid anything per hour. I think we all know that already. They live on tips. You have less people going to restaurants right now. They are going to make a better living off of that minor unemployment check that they have right now, that's barely even a livable wage for these people. Also, retail, automotive industry.
And before you continue, Chris, if I can just speak to your point, because you're absolutely right, and I knew that, and I should have included that in my conversation with the restaurant owner who called, which is that, you know, for example, the experience that Louise and I had over at this nearby restaurant to us, they had half as many tables as they normally have so that they could comply with the state spacing requirements, which meant that the servers, and the restaurant was 3/4 empty or 2/3 empty, which meant that the servers were probably making, you know, 30% of the tips that they normally would make. And that's the majority of their income. I over-tipped. I mean, I gave the guy a 25, 30% tip, you know, because I understood, you know, hey, this is a tough situation for these guys, and because I could afford to. But most people don't over-tip. They'll tip at, you know, 15 or 20%, and so the servers are getting screwed. So it's an even worse time to try to get a job as a server because you're not going to get paid as well. Back to you, Chris.
Yep, absolutely, and you're totally right about that. Not only that, credit card tips, those are automatically taxed for servers and bartenders. Some restaurants don't even give you the cash for that. They give it to you on your paycheck, so now you're getting double taxed for that. I mean, it's just ridiculous for people to truly think that restaurant employees, cooks, even managers that are working 60 hours a week, they don't get paid anything. I started as a restaurant manager for $24,000 a year back in the mid-'90s. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And that wound up when I finally got out of that last year before the pandemic. I was only making $60,000 as a general manager. You know, you're supposed to get bonuses and benefits, but it's just it's this whole that people aren't working because they don't want to, because they're, you know, living the dream on unemployment. I have a buddy who's a chef. He's making more on unemployment plus the $300 than he did as an executive chef on salary, meaning that restaurants really don't pay accordingly unless you're a higher-end restaurant that is making millions of dollars a year. I mean, restaurants only have about a 5 to 10% profit margin, and that's if they don't break dishes, destroy, you know, equipment or something like that.
Right.
So, but thank you, Tom, for all that business you do. I listen to you Monday through Friday every single day. You're wonderful. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chris. Thanks for your kind words. It's great to hear from you. I appreciate it. Becky in North Berwick, Maine. Hey, Becky, what's on your mind?
Well, I know you were talking a bit about inflation, but I just wanted to mention what's going on in my area where I live in a state that's based on tourism. The prices are outrageous, and you know, I saw a lobster roll last year that was $20. It's $30. The whole state is booked up for the summer. People, because they know people are dying to get out, and like I saw a couple of concerts that we usually go to in the summer over in New Hampshire. The tickets are twice the price they were 2 years ago. So I think you're going to see a lot of businesses trying to make up for last year. And I don't know what that's going to do.
Which makes sense. And there's a lot of pent-up demand. I mean, this was one of the things that led to the boom, you know, in the late 1940s, early 1950s, was that, you know, for I think it was 5 years that we were 4 or 5 years that we were involved in World War II. I guess it was 4 years. There was, you know, you couldn't buy things, right? I mean, you had to have rationing coupons to buy butter, and so there was this sudden, you know, pent-up demand that was just like, whoa. You know, and that's happening now too, and that will produce some inflation. But, you know, odds are it'll be temporary. I don't think that we are entering into, at the moment anyway, I'm not seeing, you know, outside of housing material, building materials, which, you know, I think to some extent are being affected by demand, but also are being affected by weather disasters. We're seeing more houses being blown down. We're seeing more houses being burned down. We're seeing more houses being, you know, the walls being frozen and the pipes bursting as a result of climate change now. I mean, this is becoming an annual horror show. And that's driving up lumber prices. It's driving up copper prices. It's driving up, you know, copper pipe and copper wiring prices. Those things are real, and those inflations will be echoing through the economy. So, Becky, thank you for the report from Berwick, Maine. And thank you all for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. So call your local Democratic Party and ask how you can volunteer. This is just the absolute best place to start. Or if there's a particular issue that really gets, that's your issue, whether it's, animal cruelty or climate change, find a group and involve yourself. There's so much you can do. Tag You're It. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code Tom. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartman. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!